Good morning, councillors. Welcome to a hearings meeting for both the Nelson City Council Regional Transport Committee and also the Tasman Regional Transport Committee. These are meetings that are held of each committee at the same place at the same time. So for that purposes, I'm joined by co-chair, Councillor Stu Bryant from the Tasman Regional Transport Committee. And as is our custom here, we'll start with Karakia. So Etu. Tua Kironga, Tua Kiraro, Tua Kiroto, Tua Kiwaro, Tua Tihei Tangata, Karonga Tipo, Karonga Tao, Humie, Huie, Tai Kie. Thank you. Thank you. We're still waiting for our first submitter. The meeting is being live streamed, so it will be live streamed on the Nelson City Council YouTube channel. So for that purpose, please remember to turn on your mics when speaking and off when listening. And that's a reminder to myself as well. Some speakers are submitting on both the Regional Land Transport Plan and also the Regional Public Transport Plan, and have provided a submission on both. So where possible, a bit of priority is, could members focus on the Regional Land Public Transport Plan, the PT part of the plan, in their questioning. And if it's more to do with a TDC submitter, say, TDC members will get priority, and vice versa for Nelson. If it's a Nelson matter, the Nelson members will get priority. The reason for that is we've got a very, very tight hearing schedule. The timings are in front of you, and we have to really endeavour to keep to those timings. The TDC members have to be leave here by 12:45 at the absolute latest. So we've got one submitter who's joining us by Zoom. That'll be Penny Wardell at 10:15. So just round any questions or any queries from panel members or hearing committee members?
No, just note that Councillor Butler will be an apology for lateness, so it should arrive around 9:30.
Yeah. Rightio. So we'll get on to the apologies. Yeah. Get on the apologies. Do have an apology from Councillor Butler from Golden Bay for lateness. She'll be arriving at 12:30, and I recognise that the 9:30. Did I say 12:30? 9:30. My apologies. Thanks. And note that for information, Mr. Steve Higgs is joining us as the Wakakatahi representative in place of Emma Spates. So can I have someone move that the apology for lateness be received? Moved, seconded by Councillor Turley. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Confirmation of all their business, as I say, we've got the schedule in front of us. Really need to keep to the timings. Any interests that need to be declared at the appropriate time. And we've got some late submissions from St Stephen's Community Church, John Young and Thomas Fry. Someone to move that we accept the late submissions. Thanks to Councillor Edgar, seconded to wish of the Mayor. Those in favour will say aye. Against, carried.
Sorry, procedural question.
Yes.
Since we are officially two different meetings, do you then need a mover and seconder for Tasman for their committee?
That would be helpful. That's why I took the apologies from. Yeah. Yeah.
Second.
Yep. Yeah, that was recorded. Right.
Sorry, so do you have a mover and seconder for Tasman for the late submissions, or are they RLTP ones?
I understand that they're RLTP or LTP.
One's from Richmond and two are from Te Hinanui.
And are they to do with public transport?
Yes.
Right, so you need a Tasman mover and seconder.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's what myself and councillor Turley were just doing, because we've previously done the apologies.
That's how we've logged it.
Yeah, we'll get used to it.
We'll get used to it. Yeah, but the two are from St Stephen's Community Church and John Young, are both Tuhunanui residents about public transport. Yes, I'll put that. So it's been moved. Those two. So it's been moved by Councillor Edgar.
No.
Councillor Bryant, councillor Turley, perhaps I'll move.
Right.
I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Against, carried. Thank you.
I thought we'd done that.
Apologies.
Yeah, apologies. Right. Our first speaker is here, Bernie Goldsmith, representing the Nelson's Residents Association. I see you at the back there. Bernie, you ready to go?
I have used a PowerPoint before, I only used it yesterday. What do I do? Is it about-
Yeah, one of the officers will come down.
PowerPoint is just massive.
Would you like me to move the slides forward? You just tell me next slide and I'll do it for you.
I think I can do it.
Okay.
I've forgotten my entire speech.
Where's the bear? Oh, there you are. Where's everybody?
Oh, do you want me to start now? Oh, tēnā koe me Reese, tēnā koutou councillors, tēnā koutou te ahutanga o tēnei rā. My name is Bernie Goldsmith. I am the President of the Nelson Resident Association, and on behalf of the NRA, I will attempt to summarise this report, give our recommendations, conclusion, and end with a thought. I'm super stoked to be in front of both councils together today. It saves me having to repeat myself twice. Hang on. Forgot I've got this. There are three basic elements to a public transport system. It hasn't done anything. Safety, efficiency, and cost effective. You have to get someone from point A to point B in the most safe, efficient, and cost effective way possible. Both councils have been operating a public transport system since around 1927, and both councils have done a dismal job of it. In your own words, you have underperformed. I mean, 1927 has got to be the era of the horse and cart. Look, love it. I'll give you an example of dismal. I lived in Motueka and I had a full-time job in Nelson. I didn't own a car, not because I wanted to save the planet, it was because I couldn't afford one. So I had three options to me. One was buy a $5 bus ticket, get on the bus with the school kids and get to work late. The second option was combination of hitching and push bike riding. And the third option was straight hitching. And I did this for about 4 months, 5 days a week. It was literally exhausting. So let's get on the bus and transport ourselves to 2021. You have both councils collaborating together to produce a public transport system in the top of the south. You still have three elements, but one element has been taken out and another element added instead. So you still have safety, you have efficiency, cost effective has been taken out and low carbon emissions added. So in your report at the beginning, it talks about listening to feedback from the public, incorporating that into a plan, and encouraging people to take the bus. Towards the end of the first stage, it then talks about spending more millions and millions of dollars, and part of it is about changing fleets. So Auckland has just brought their $1.4 million or $1.4 plus million hydrogen fueled state-of-the-art brand spanking new bus. What is hydrogen fuel? I love that picture. Hydrogen fuel, the positives of hydrogen fuel: colourless, odourless, plentiful in supply, and it ticks the low carbon emission box. The negatives is that it's extremely volatile, it's extremely flammable, extremely expensive to produce, extremely expensive to transport, and you have to use a lot of fossil fuels to end up producing hydrogen fuel. So these are one of the examples that people are putting forward to change their fleets. Okay, so who pays? Both councils have a AA credit rating. It's quite hard to talk in front of everybody. Both councils have a AA credit rating. Impressive until you have a look that both councils are in debt heavily, set to double, triple, and in some cases, especially to do with the Waimea Dam, maybe even quadruple. Both councils have different sources of funding, but their main source of funding is the ratepayer. And the ratepayers are worried. Why? Both councils have a history of blowing budgets. Both councils have a history of no accountability when they blow budgets. Both councils have zero transparency, and they seem to pull money out of one place to fund other projects. So the ratepayers are worried, and rightly so. They have a right to be worried. So I think what we need to do is look here and realise it's not about us and you. We are all on this bus together. We are all on this bus together, from the Haira out to Golden Bay, Tākaka, Motueka, out to St Arnaud, all the way to Murchison, Tasman and Nelson. We are all on this bus together. We want the same things. We want safety, cost-effective, efficient and low carbon emission public transport system. So here's our recommendations. Here's some recommendations. Number one, that you look at appointing someone independent of both councils that looks at these four elements, particularly for the ratepayer, the cost effectiveness of each element. Number two, that you look at other forms of funding. Don't use the ratepayers as the only go-to solution. There has got to be other solutions. Maybe look at slashing salaries. I mean, both councils have made a commitment to save the planet. Put your money where your mouth is. Look at yourselves. Don't go to the bottom of the table, go to the top. And number three, review honestly. If it's not working, stop and have a look at it. If it's underperforming, and an example of underperforming would be if you see a bus and it's a 60-seater bus and only 3 people are using it, that's underperforming. If the ratepayers are pouring money into it and it's still not getting used, that's another example of underperforming. So those are our three recommendations. Number one, that you appoint somebody independent of both councils to look at all 4 elements, including the cost effectiveness. Number two, that you look at other forms of funding. Don't use the ratepayer as the go-to only form. And number three, that you review honestly and you give a transparent feedback back to the public. In conclusion, I just want to say thank you very much for allowing us to speak on behalf of the NRA, and to remind yourselves that at the end of the day, the wheels of the bus will go round and round. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Bernie. I really appreciate it. Any questions from any members of the committees? I think, yeah, thanks so much.
Oh,
I think
sweet.
no questions. It just means it's a very clear, concise.
I
submission.
learned because I came here and saw that first one. I thought, oh, get my act together. Hey, I've got this. This is our 3 recommendations. So I'm happy to just leave it here for someone to
Good.
get.
Really appreciate that. Thank you very much,
Oh,
Bernie.
cheers. And thank you very much.
Good.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks very much. Kate, I see you're here, so I understand you've got a presentation as well.
I have.
Every time we get set up.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I'll do my best to present the thoughts of my group, which is Nelson Tasman Community Transport Trust. Our members live in Motueka, Mapua, Wakefield, and on the Moutere Hills, and we're looking at this plan basically from the Tasman point of view. We feel, our considered opinion is that the plan as currently presented is not fit for purpose, the purpose being to get people in the country areas to switch from car travel to bus travel. For a number of years, I also lived on the Moutere Hills in the 1990s, hoping to run a small apple orchard. That orchard was never an economic unit. It now is one of many lifestyle blocks scattered over the Moutere Hills. With its lovely rolling countryside where people, wealthy people, can create their own personal paradise in the sun. This comes at a cost though, a massive cost that's not visible to the naked eye. Most of those properties need an income from outside the gate. And as I've read, every 300 metres of car travel melts a kilogram of glacier ice. Imagine how much is melting each day in the Tasman district because of car travel. Ironically, the drivers of the offending vehicles love nature and hate the droughts, wildfires, hailstorms, and every other possible disaster you can imagine that's going to happen to nature, including the extinction of species like the little blue penguin. That's where you come in, by designing a bus service that will tempt all those nature lovers to leave their cars behind and use a bus to get to work, probably driving or biking to the bus stop. Of course, there are plenty of other potential passengers along the way living in towns who also need a bus. But the lifestylers who can afford to drive are the greater challenge and the greater threat as rural subdivisions spread like a rash over the hills and valleys, and country highways carry nose-to-tail traffic at the rush hour. With your help, the good life can be better, must be better. Please consider separate town and country buses. The needs of country folk are not catered for in the current plan. If going through to Nelson, they're expected to take a route that will be significantly slower than the route they currently drive. Though your own experience with NBus indicates that people prefer direct rather than meandering routes. Grafting a country bus onto the town bus is a fatal flaw that we believe will wreck the chances of the bus service as currently proposed ever taking off in the country districts. The country buses or express buses should overnight in the outlying town where they start and finish their daily run. That is Wakefield and Motueka. They would stop at key places to pick up passengers, including on Gladstone Road, before heading into Nelson from Richmond along the Richmond Deviation and Whakatū Drive, with no further stops until passengers get off near their workplaces or other destinations in Nelson. These buses should all go via Bishopdale and use Beatson Road as a shortcut and swing by NMIT if students are aboard. Distinguishing signage would alert people to the fact that these buses do not go through Stoke. These country buses should and could start this year. They are not part of any existing contract. Nowadays, I live in Nelson, in a house that was chosen partly for its proximity to a bus stop. I use the N bus often to get to Richmond, which takes 30 minutes. I could get there twice as fast if the bus went via Whakatū Drive. Instead, you plan to add another 5 or 10 minutes onto my trip by taking me where I don't want to go. Please reconsider the current plan to make it more likely to do its job. We are just as eager as you to make public transport in country districts a resounding success, however challenging that may be. One last point. I've recently heard it stressed by TDC officers that all modes of transport have parity in the council's eyes. In other words, they're all equally important. It would be more appropriate in view of the current climate emergency for modes that are less damaging to the climate to be given priority. That is, buses and bikes should have priority over private cars. A simple thing like allowing express buses up Beatson Road where cars are not allowed would give the message that you really want people to use the buses for the sake of the climate, and you are giving buses priority. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kate. Probably got a little bit of time for any questions from any of the committee members.
I have one. Kate, just in relation to your statement around perhaps serving lifestylers first, do you not think it's probably more of a priority to get urban people on the buses and more likely to happen quicker than people in lifestyle blocks who've chosen to live there because they have different lifestyles and different time commitments? It's very hard to get all those people, I would imagine, to use buses at the same time.
I think it's a huge challenge, Councillor Bryant, and that's why I feel myself personally, when I was living up there, I would have used a bus because I'm a nature lover. I would have if there'd been one. I agree that the townspeople are very, very important, and it's very easy for them to hop on a bus. For the country people, their whole lifestyle has been based around using a car for everything: social, educational, economic. They hop in their car. Each adult in those lifestyle blocks must own a car. Their lifestyle's built around it, but the climate can't take that. It just can't take that. Little blue penguins are dying because of that. I know it's hard, but well, I've had my say.
Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of nature.
Thank you.
And Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Kate. You mentioned park and ride facilities. And you do in here mention Richmond ones, but you talk about each of the townships because, yeah, a lot of people have historically said, oh, you should have park and ride at A&P. But of course, once you've already got people in cars and they've already driven, for example, from Wakefield to Richmond, it's usually hard to get them to stop and get off the bus. So when you talk about at each of the townships, you're talking about have park and ride facilities in Motueka and Wakefield, etc. Can you just...
Well, let's say a person lives at 88 Valley, and it's not very far to come into Wakefield, but as you say, they hop in their car and they can either keep driving or they can stop at that car park and get on a bus. But the other aspect is, and we think this is a coming trend, electric bikes. or any sort of bike. And these bikes are pretty valuable. They wouldn't want to park them if there was not secure parking. And that to us is the way of the future, that people will get to a bus stop for whatever reason and then leave their other vehicle there and get on the bus. This is a sort of a dream. As Councillor Bryant indicated, this is a culture change that needs to happen, but you have to allow it to happen and encourage it to happen. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Karen. I don't think there's any more questions. A very, very clear and succinct submission. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Barbara and Tim Robson, and I see them up in the public gallery. So if you'd like to come forward, Tom, Barbara. Good. Lovely to see you again. We've read I think everyone's read your submission, so chance to expand and highlight.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā hui hui mai tātou. Thank you for reading our submission. I don't think it would have taken you very long. It's not a hugely scientific one, and that's actually not the reason why we are here, to be scientists or experts in transport. We are obviously not. But we are fully invested in the future of our grandchildren, your grandchildren, Te Puna Pono, and that is indeed why we are here. Thank you for putting together this collaborative plan. We can only imagine the effort and the hours that's gone into that, and we appreciate and respect that. Thank you too for the wonderful bike rack that we parked in this morning prior to coming here early. I might add that, yes, we are earlier than scheduled, so you're not getting the polished version of this presentation that you would have had we been rehearsing. But so if we're not quite as succinct, that's the reason. There is very much to appreciate in this draft plan, and we like the ethos, we like the direction, but we are very apprehensive about the timeline. A timeline for us that stretches way into the distance, and for any of us who are hearing climate reports at the moment, we will know that the time is ticking by very quickly. I guess one of the main points, and one that was in our submission, was about the issue of express buses and Clearway. And we note that historically that has been mentioned several times. 2018, for example, there were quite a number of submissions, we understand exactly, on that. For us, it's kind of a no-brainer priority, acknowledging that, yes, we don't fully understand the complexities and the restraints under which you are working. However, for us, having experience driving in Auckland in a Clearway, because there were several of us in a vehicle, we saw the frustrations of the people who were backed up, and we thought, yes, okay, we can do this in Nelson. Yesterday, we drove to Richmond in our EV, I might add, but I don't think EVs are the answer. We can't substitute vehicles with vehicles. One person in an EV is still clogging up the system. But we noticed again that about 1 in 20 vehicles had 2 people and the rest were solo drivers. Yeah, I think you're fully aware of this, and we've been aware of it for some time as we've stood patiently beside the road with placards in different guises trying to encourage people to share with their neighbours and get out of their cars. So what will make commuters actually make the desired modal shift? And I do like that language, it's a new piece of jargon, a modal shift. That means to me, get out of your car. So one answer would be sitting in the traffic, watching buses full of happy commuters and cars with 3 or 4 occupants pass by in the express lane while we sit there bumper to bumper and late for work. The buses will be passing every 15 minutes. All right, I know we're leaping to stage 3 of the plan, but actually we want it to happen now for it to have impact. And on the back of those express buses, there will be bike racks full of bikes because people have biked to the bus and then will hop off and bike to work once they arrive, be it Nelson or be it Richmond. And we noticed, because we were heading for Richmond, there was quite a backup at 9 o'clock in the morning heading that way. So we're not just talking Nelson exclusively here, we're talking principles. When we do eventually arrive after a probably stressful journey, if we are one person in one car, we will find that actually there's nowhere to park because in Nelson or Richmond, councils have wisely reduced the number of parks available and certainly made them expensive. So we think that free parking has a bit to answer for, and an imbalance of that in terms of people thinking, well, it's cheaper in Richmond, I'll drive out there, and we can understand the impact for the retail sector in Nelson if that's an issue. COVID taught us that people can change if they have no choice. And yes, we would like to appeal to people's better nature, but for us as pretty concerned climate activists, we can see that even with educated friends that they don't really get it. So they need help to get it. And as with COVID lockdown, we had help to get it because it was an emergency, and NCC uses that term. So what will make us get out of our cars if it's expensive, if it's inconvenient, if it uses my valuable time? So that is what we are asking that you guys use in your planning as a driving force. Get a clear way, encourage, of course, and I'll jump to a point, we've got to sell it, of course, but we, many of us on the sideline have been trying to sell that for a long time. So we are saying compress this timeline because if we go, excuse the colloquialism, in a half-assed way, it's not going to work. Because if you've got buses going slowly by, which might be stage 1, but not every 15 minutes, then people are still going to be resistant. It has to be a really, in our view, a really committed move. And so the previous speaker was alluding to park and ride hubs, the logistics of which, of course, need to be worked through very carefully. We realise that. But the express lane is crucial. If you get an express bus gets stuck in the same crowd, well, then why would you bother? And we couldn't sell that. And express means express, looking at using the deviation, the most direct route, so that multiple stops are not part of the deal. We say our smart little cities, plural, need to work towards a pedestrian-friendly, welcoming and safe environment. So that means encouraging and making possible pedestrian access. And we, in our past, before we let our passports expire, travelled quite a lot and experienced 10 years plus ago that pedestrian ways in a number of cities work extremely well. With decisive action to reduce the number of vehicles in our city, we will create that community, people and business-friendly hubs, driven into the city by friendly bus drivers. And I noticed, having poured through some of the document, one of the pieces in the survey said what they liked about our buses was the friendly bus drivers. And since I'm a bus user on wet days, I have noticed that, and the opportunities for engaging with my neighbours that hopping on the bus allows me. So yes, we need a promotion campaign. Yes, we need all kinds of things which we will leave to the experts to develop. But we decided to front up here today to put a person on the street view of this because we feel passionately about it. As we speak, students throughout the country, not Nelson this time, but are doing climate action in force. And I want to quote from a 13-year-old who I speak for, as well as my younger grandchildren in this. Young Mac Inskeep says, if we don't halve our emissions in the next 9 years, our most loved earth, this one home we share, will be at breaking point. The earth will not be able to recycle good air anymore due to pollution. Our leaders really have to make a change now, otherwise it will be too late. We've talked about convenience in this presentation, which for many people, because of the demands of having a job and working a family and so on, is about as wide as their thinking allows them to be at the moment. But the ultimate inconvenience to us is this planet carrying on the downward trend it is currently. Please act now. Thank you. And my friend here will continue. As we understand, we have a few more minutes between us.
Well, we've got about another minute.
Oh, we understood we had 10 minutes.
Well,
Have I talked for 10 minutes?
You've talked for 10 minutes, yeah.
Gosh, I can wrap it on.
Thank you. I always bow to my wife's eloquence, so I have very little to add, except, yeah, there are three key words here. One is leadership, and that's what we desperately need through the country and in Nelson and Tasman. Leadership, please. The second one is the idea of express. What is express? And that means moving quickly, both in planning and in reality on a bus. And the third one I like is Kerry Bateman's presentation to the Nelson Council plan a week or so ago. Just he outlined all the case studies. It is a no-brainer. The case studies show that you can make progress. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks, Barbara. Very clear, very succinct, but no questions from anybody? I think you made your points very, very clearly and really appreciate the time and effort that you put into it. Thank you so much. And
Ngā mihi nui.
thank you very, very much. Next, we have Jane Murray from the Public Health Unit of DHB. Give you a moment to get set up, Jane. Love to see you again. You can be assured that we have read your submission.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time today. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Public Health Unit for Nelson Marlborough Health. The Nelson Marlborough Health overall supports the plan, and the intended changes will result in a larger proportion of the region's residents having access to bus services. We strongly support many aspects of the plan, including the pricing information. We did see there was a bit of difference between a couple of the council documents. There was one document that was very broad in what it said about pricing, but one summary document said that there could be a $2 fare for anywhere in Nelson Richmond. And we strongly support that introduction of a $2 fare because it will make bus journeys more affordable for a greater proportion of the population. One area that we do want to look at is frequency. About a month ago, it was my husband's birthday, and he works in town, and my daughter and I we all live in Richmond, and I decided to take the bus into town to meet him for his birthday, to take him out for dinner. And we decided to leave about 5 o'clock. We live very close to that new temporary roundabout out on Salisbury Road. We started walking up there going, yep, we'll catch the bus, but I didn't check the timetable because I knew the buses ran about every 15 minutes. Walking up, and then I saw the bus go past. It's like, it's going to be a 15-minute wait. But we turned the corner. I bumped into my cousin who happened to be biking along the road. We had this nice little wander. It was a beautiful sunny day. We sat in the bus stop. I swear it was like less than 10 minutes. We were there. Bang, next bus, we were way into town. What the concern I have here about the changes is that what is proposed is those frequent buses between Richmond and Nelson won't be running at 15 minutes anymore. So for us, if we had known that the buses run every half hour, I would have turned around, jumped in the car and made that journey. And I imagine that those commuters in the morning, which my husband is one of, if he misses that bus, he'll be just like, okay, take the car. It's just too hard to take the bus if it's every half an hour. If you make that little slip up, the cat misbehaves or something and you can't get your cat out the window if you're leaving in the morning, then those tiny little things can change how you commute. So if you've got buses running every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes, then the bus routes are going to be far more attractive. 15 minutes is the minimum frequency at which services are usually considered good enough for travellers to turn up without consulting a schedule. That came from Auckland City Council. I know that was true for me when we took this bus trip. I thought, bus runs about every 15 minutes. I don't need to double check the timetable. So currently the peak times are about 15 minutes, but this plan will result in a reduced frequency of peak times. So that there may be fewer bus patrons, which is not the outcome I think you're trying to achieve in your plan. We consider that that this needs to be relooked at. We also think that the bus timetabling of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. continues to be a barrier for people working the early morning shifts and evening shifts. There's also a barrier for those people who work in one area, decide to go out for dinner, and then there's no bus home. So we'd like to see that altered, perhaps to 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And we'd like all of these changes to be made at stage 1. Would also, from the Public Health Services perspective, like to see a bus stop outside 281 Queen Street that allows pickups and drop-offs. At the moment, the bus driver may or may not drop off outside 281 Queen Street, but they hardly ever will pick up. And that spot, which is right outside the health hub, it's 10 metres perhaps from the public library, would be well used. So it's an ideal spot, but it's just underutilised at the moment. And it's a long walk if you're an elderly person to walk from Richmond Library all the way up to the TDC office bus stop. The other key thing we'd like to mention is that bus patrons were able to transfer easily between the routes, such as the new airport route. Being able to transport into the Tahuna route would be something that I didn't quite see in the plan. And a tiny little thing, just from my perspective of coming in today, I was trying to decide between walking and cycling, and my husband said, why don't you put your bike on the bus? And I'd never done that before. And it was 8:30 in the morning. I thought, I don't want to muck up a whole bus load of people mucking around with me on a bus. But I do remember in Christchurch City that in their new bus exchange, they had this little area where they had the bike rack and you could go and practice putting your bike up and putting it on. And so when I jumped off the bus today, I said to the bus driver, do you mind if I just play around with this thing? Just because I just wanted to know what it would look like. So it was a tiny little thing, but it is actually the tiny little things that make the difference. So great work overall in the plan. We'd just like things brought forward, just tweak those little details, extend those buses out to 15 minutes and maybe earlier in the morning and definitely later into the evening. Would be fantastic. Thank you for your time.
Opportunity for any questions? I've just got a quick one, Jane. The DHB are a big employer, and I want to pick up on that 7 to 7 with the how many of your employees need to be at work by, say, 6:45 for a change of shift or end of shift?
The health board runs its shifts for hospital clinical staff
Yeah.
so in a slightly interesting manner. They have them on rotating shifts. So
Yeah.
you'll have some on the morning shift and then the next, after a few weeks, they'll change the afternoon and then they'll change
Yeah, rotating
around.
forward, yeah.
So the bulk of our staff are between, are kind of like 7:30 through to 5:30, 8:30. And we did look at the, we did a travel survey 2019 to find out what the hours of work were. So it is the bulk. But we do know that we do have a certain proportion of shift workers, and it's kind of those morning shift workers that are interested if they've got that option. But I can't give you those figures now, but I can certainly forward them on.
That'll be appreciated. Thanks. Councillor Inga, you had a question.
Yes, you mentioned, it's page 75 of ours, but section 24 of your submission, you frequently mention Waimea Road, Highview Drive intersection. Do you mean Clarence Drive, the new one? Because Highview Drive doesn't intersect with Waimea, it runs parallel.
I might have got it wrong when I looked at Google Maps.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's the new traffic lights up to the,
Yes.
whatever it's called, Sea View, Ocean View.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, thanks, Jane. That was a very clear submission. Good points to have made. Thank you very much for the for your submission and coming in.
Thank
I appreciate it. Next, we have Peter Ollerenshaw from Nelsust.
I've got a visitor with me today.
You have a supporter this morning.
This is Marcel, my grandson. So Marcel loves buses. This is him at the SBL terminal. This is him driving a bus. And this is him on the bus. And just making the point here that unlike a car, where they're strapped down facing backwards, on the bus, you can face forward and see the world going by from on high. But this is not mainly about Marcel. So firstly, bouquets. Thank you for working so hard on this comprehensive plan. It has most things we've long been suggesting, but it has one glaring omission: express buses and their routes. We feel that express buses are the central spine to a public transport system. Offering a fast trip between the two centres of Nelson and Richmond should actually be the central plank of a PT strategy. Yet you seem to have missed that. That's just packed, mate. You can do that sooner rather than later. Call it a trial and use the N-bus branding for now, but don't wait 2 years to do it. And we'd just like to talk about the route of the express buses. Express buses, by their nature, have to be fast. You can't have them zigzagging around suburban streets, stopping everywhere. We submit that it is crucial that you change to the plan to have express buses running on the Richmond Deviation and Whakatu Drive, and also we suggest Beatson's Avenue coming into town. Secondly, we suggest they should have minimal stops. A bus that stops at every stop is not an express bus. We suggest that you just have one stop between Richmond and Nelson, and that's at the hospital. Stoke is already well served by the non-express bus routes between Nelson and Richmond, which both go through there. And the next thing we'd like you to do is to decouple the express buses from having to be a country bus. While we think it's a great initiative for people to be able to stay on the same bus all the way from Motueka or Wakefield through to Nelson as express buses, that doesn't mean that every express bus has to be a country bus. We're asking for extra express buses in between the country buses, so the net effect is express buses between Nelson and Richmond every half hour, every quarter hour during peaks. Some of these won't originate in the country or be going to the country areas, and others will. We missed this from our submission, but we'd like you to extend the bus hours. We've now realised a second glaring omission, and that is that extending the hours so that people attending a meeting can get home. We have a NALSUS committee member living in Stoke who doesn't drive and is unable to bike. And with the buses stopping at 7 p.m, how can he get home from a meeting? We suggest the buses need to be extended to 10 p.m. on weekdays, 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday at half-hourly intervals to make it a viable option. Bus priority lanes shared with trade vehicles. We note that you're waiting for the Nelson Future Access Project to determine whether or not bus priority lanes will be provided. We don't think this is good enough. Regardless of the outcome of the study, buses have priority. To have buses having priority over cars makes them more attractive than car commuting. Priority lanes are crucial to the mode shifting people onto buses. Many people would sooner be stuck in traffic in their own car than stuck in traffic on a bus. This priority, of course, must include priority lanes on the Richmond Deviation and Whakatu Drive right to Beatson's Road, and these shared with trade vehicles to boost commercial efficiency. We'd also like to talk about the Waimea Road priority lane. Regardless of the outcome of the Nelson Future Access Study, we need a priority lane on Waimea Road, along with making it more livable and having better cycling. So this is our proposal that we have brought up before, but not all of you will have seen it. So what we've got here is a peak hour priority lane on just one side of the road coming into town. Our reasoning being that once you've got people onto the buses, you don't, they're on the buses, they can't take a car home in the afternoon, so you don't need the priority lane on the other side. But also most of the traffic is still tends to be tidal, mainly into Nelson in the morning, out in the afternoon. So there's so there's less need for a morning priority lane going out. So here we've got a cycle lane on each side of the road, alongside the footpath, but protected from the traffic lanes. And unlike the proposal in the Nelson Future Access Project, we've got a flush median turning lane in the middle for livability, so that people can turn into their houses and turn into side roads without being banned from doing a right turn. Plus also, when you're crossing Waimea Road, you only ever cross one lane before you get to a refuge. And lastly, we've got trees to signal where the refuges are and give secondary improvements to the livability of the area. So regardless of what the Nelson Future Access Project comes up with, we can do this ourselves without the NZTA. It's a local road and a comparatively inexpensive way to not only get bus priority on Waimea Road, but solve livability and cycling issues there as well. Other bus priority, we think we should learn from Holland, where they allow buses and bikes direct access through the centre of towns and cities, but make cars go the long way around. So we think we should do the same in Richmond and Nelson city centres, close them off to through traffic other than bikes and buses. So that means cul-de-sacking Bridge and Hardy Street either side of a pedestrianised Trafalgar Street. And before you say that's too hard, we suggest a winter trial for 2 weekends and 1 week for a winter festival with braziers, chestnut and mulled wine cellars, fire poise and comedians, musicians and dancing to keep warm. Perhaps the Light Nelson Festival could be part of it, all to get people into the city in winter when retailers have nothing to lose and a lot to gain from the trial. So you don't consult, but you do a well-explained, well-executed temporary trial. The temporary trial is the consultation. Only after the trial do you ask for feedback. We need to be brave on this. And lastly, a priority at traffic lights, e.g. a traffic light at the bottom of Hospital Hill coming into Nelson, allowing cars to turn free, but buses to be able to stop there and give them priority before the cars to go up the hill. Turning into traffic, how can we make sure other traffic always immediately stops and waits for a bus to pull out as soon as the indicators go on? Perhaps it's a publicity campaign. I'm not sure if you can do a bylaw on this, you probably can't. So just to conclude, if we're serious about wanting to transform the way we move around, if we're serious about mode shift, we must make buses more attractive than driving. You need to ask the question, are these proposals going to make it better than car commuting for most people? If the answer is no, probably not, then you haven't done enough. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. A question from Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Peter. Just a couple of quick questions. So in your submission for the express bus, you talked about stops at Wale Hospital, Selwyn City, but you've just said today hospital only?
Yeah, I was just reconsidering that, but you know, that's open for debate. Obviously with an express bus, the fewer stops, the better. But you've got to balance that against usability for people to get off at different places.
And just with the express buses, so everyone who has talked about express buses so far has talked about Richmond to Nelson in that morning peak. So is there the same demand, morning peak, Nelson to Richmond? Or is this about Richmond and their rural commuters or passengers? Or is there the same demand going the other way, do you think, where there should be express buses Nelson to Richmond in that morning peak?
We weren't suggesting it was just a peak service at all. We were suggesting it would be all day.
Right.
You know, so it would be both ways all day.
And then just my final question is, I'm so sorry, I'm just struggling. Oh, the diagram's gone. Okay, I'm struggling with this diagram.
Yeah.
So the 2 lanes, because there's a lot of very permanent things like trees and refuges.
Yeah, sure.
So frequently when people have talked about clearways, it's been done by lights, and so things are a bit more fluid.
No. Yeah, so on the right-hand side here is the parking lane. So there'd only be parking on one side of the road. So it's parking during off-peak, and during peak, it's a clearway. That's our proposal.
Yeah, and so then what do the east-west people do coming out of side streets and side houses?
They go onto the traffic lane. You following me?
Okay, so there's no
there's no parking on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're coming out of a side street or a house,
yes,
you've just got to wait for a break. There's no.
No, that's right. What I was meaning is that
anymore.
Well, no, there's a flash median in the middle, so that when you're driving on the road and turning into a side street or turning into a house, you've got somewhere to stop without holding up traffic. That was a fault we felt in the future access proposal, that you would have to ban right turns, you know, or else hold up traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Just in relation, and just following on from Councillor Edgar's question about the express bus, the express bus you're proposing to Wakefield, was that all day as well, or just peak commuter times?
We think what you've already proposed for the country buses is great, but we're just talking about Richmond to Nelson as the additional express buses. You following me? So that the Motueka and the Wakefield ones would be as you proposed. That's what we agree with that. So they're not all day hourly intervals or something like that. Yeah. Just Richmond to Nelson is the half hourly ones we suggest.
And so the Wakefield ones will be as proposed, which are pretty much commuter times initially.
Yeah, that's right.
That's fine. That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Oh, Councillor Turley, sorry.
Just about the permanent express buses going through and Waimea Road, that would eliminate any daytime parking. Using that lane, you would only have overnight parking. Is that what you're looking
not overnight, but it would be at off-peak times. So we weren't assuming that priority lane would be open all day. It would just be at peak times.
I thought you said you wanted it permanent express buses.
Yeah, permanent express buses, but not necessarily on that priority lane. The priority lane would be a peak hour priority lane.
Okay.
So sorry, I didn't make that clear.
All right. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate the time and effort you put in the submission and coming along this morning. Very, very clear. If I want to get up and have a little quick stretch, just got a 5 minute, just a few minute pause and And then we've Celia's just over there. That's right. Okay, we'll get back underway again. We've got Debs. Welcome, Debs. Good. Read your submission.
Yeah, it's Maria. Nice to see councillors in the room from both Nelson City and Tasman District Council, and also obviously the staff and others in support, and NZTA rep as well. So this is a submission totally in my personal capacity. Most of you probably see me in a work capacity, but this I want to really stress that this is my personal submission today. I have lived in North Nelson now for 17 years, coming up 17 years, and I travel to town for work 5 days a week. I actually purchased an e-bike just under 5 weeks ago, and I've already done 500 Ks on that, just making my way to and from work. Now, that doesn't sound much, but if you think about that in 5 weeks, what that might look like over a year, and what that might look like for the many people who are travelling in from what I call the North Nelson end, then that adds up to a lot of people. If we can get them out of cars and onto bikes and onto buses, that's a really good thing. And the other thing I just want to talk about with public transport is it's a people thing. It's a real people thing. If you want to get people into buses, if you want to shift them around, they will do that because they think it's a good way to travel. And if people don't think it's a good way to travel, if they're still addicted to jumping in their car because of the convenience, then nothing that we do is going to change. So I think if whatever comes with this needs to come with the perspective that we need to think about changing people's mindsets and encouraging people to think differently. Obviously, there are drivers to that. Some of the drivers are things like finance, but mostly it's convenience. Now, we have a North Nelson Facebook group, and over the past few days, we've been buzzing a little bit on talking about this regional public transport plan. And a lot of people aren't even necessarily aware of the timetables, where the bus routes go, even though it's there. And it strikes me that if we are going to make changes, we need to reach out and think really strongly about the marketing end of this, because in the end, as I said, even though we're talking about buses and lanes and whatever, it's a people thing. We've got to get people doing things differently. I wanted to focus on two things that I think really strike me as a regular bus user. I have a B card. I do jump on the bus. Because of my work, I actually travel between Nelson and Tasman quite a bit, and I use that time on the bus to read up on my papers, ready for the meeting that I might have out at Richmond, and then jump on the bus again and debrief my notes and check my emails on my way back to work. But I do just want to stress, and I really appreciate the previous thing, that that bus, if it gets held up, I'm late for a meeting, and that's happened a few times, and I think those things around Express is really important. If you're a commuter, you're a professional, and you need to make meetings on time, making sure buses get there is really important. The bus terminal here in Nelson City is abysmal. It's cold, it's wet, it's damp, it's awful, it's not encouraging, you can't sit there, the seat's covered in chewing gum. You know, it's not a nice place to be. If you want people to get on the bus, think about where you're leaving them from. And then the final thing I just wish to talk about is North Nelson. Essentially, everything stops at Clifton Terrace. And nothing goes past there. And there's a huge bunch of environmentally friendly people out there I know who've given it a try to bike or get to the beginning of that bus stop and just get in their car and then keep driving. And I think there's a real market out there of people who would really appreciate a much better bus service. And so I've suggested in there thinking about going out to Hera regularly, particularly at times when people might commute to and from work or school, so those peak times, and having hubs, park and ride options. And there's plenty of option for parking at some of those, and including bike lockups as well. And if I've got another second or two, I just want to say, can we please make sure that the bus racks on the front of the bike racks on the front of the buses are able to put e-bikes on, because as I cycle, I see more and more people using e-bikes, and just need to make sure that it's accessible for people to put those. Yeah, that was my timing.
Thanks, Deb. It's very, very clear. Opportunity for couple of quick questions, or a quick question has been done. I think you made the submission very, very clear. So
thank you.
Okay. Mike. Someone who almost needs no introduction. When your hands.
I want to tell a few stories, but no, I asked, why are we doing this? And there's only one reason for doing anything, that's to make life good. And I define good as feeling in control of your life and, you know, kindness and gentleness and having time to do the things we care about. I retired from the classroom some 43 years ago to be an artist, and I moved to Nelson, and I got a house close enough to the city that I could walk or cycle for all of my journeys. I've had time to do a heap of stuff. I've only ever lived in one house. I've stayed in that house for the whole time, and I've become part of that community. The town planning initiatives to stay within the existing footprint make really good sense. Enabling people to live close to the places they need to be so they can walk or cycle for more of their journeys makes really good sense. Enabling them to work in their own neighbourhoods makes really good sense. All of our policies, in fact, are transport policies. But my submission compliments the council on the active and public transport initiatives. Well done. Caught the bus the other night again and used my B card. I passed a cyclist, or we passed a cyclist at Richardson Street. He was just an ordinary cyclist, no e-bike, and he turned into Waikari Street about the time we went past Waikari Street, actually. It's about making all of us realize that actually climbing into our own cars and taking a journey, whatever journey we want to, whenever we want to, wherever we want to, on our own, actually is not a reasonable choice. We have to start thinking about that. And so far, we've done an awful lot to try to accommodate that habit. And every time we build another road, whether it's a clearway, every time we increase capacity, we're saying it's okay to go on doing that. I think the folk in this city could give leadership to the rest of the country, quite frankly. And I think we should expect it of all of us to say, actually, if you don't need to take the journey, don't. If you can travel with your neighbour, travel with your neighbour. If you can work from home one day a week, work from home one day a week. I was on the Transport Select Committee back in between 2002 and 2005. And the Auckland mayors came in at the beginning of 2003 and they wanted $5 billion to solve their transport issues. By the end of the year, it was $8 billion. And by May of the following year, it was $10 billion. I said, hang on, you guys, you have something like 700,000 cars on your road. With an average occupancy rate of 1.1 person per car, you have no shortage of capacity. You just aren't using it very wisely. I then suggested that the opportunity cost of $10 billion was something like $1 billion a year, $1,000 million a year. I said, tell you what, for $50 million a year, roughly, I can give you $1 million lottery every week just for Auckland. The only way you can get a ticket is by leaving your car at home for the day. Not one member of my select committee came to me and said, that's the idea of using a lesser sum of money to change the behaviour might have legs. When I went to my caucus, they said it wasn't policy. Well, the world has changed since then. We actually know that there are smarter ways of doing things. I also went to my caucus about that time and said, it's time we got serious about climate change. We were very busy with a whole heap of other things, so we didn't. Well, we're getting serious about that now too. And the role of this committee is to enable us to get to the places we need to be when we need to be there, to enable us to move the stuff that needs to be moved when it needs to be moved. But actually moving stuff that doesn't need to be moved is pretty smart too. And when I go to the supermarket and I buy a loaf of bread from Auckland, I'm saying, hang on, we have bakers here. When I buy it from the other side of the planet, I say, are we serious about climate change? It's a bit of a waffly philosophical thing, isn't it, this submission? But really, we have to change. And the message we have to give to our people in this city is it's up to us. Not up to you, but up to us. And your task is to provide the messages. How much, I don't know what the opportunity cost of the money you're planning to spend on transport is here, but I'm asking how much of it are you prepared to spend on changing the behaviour? Because that's what we desperately need to do, to say to the people of the city, it's up to us to give a lead to the rest of the planet. Because they all think they can climb into their car whenever they want, or at least a fair few of them do, and those that don't would like to. That's enough from me.
Thanks, Mike. Got a moment for any questions? No, I think it's pretty clear what you've said.
Just one, then,
Yeah,
just,
sure.
if you go, tell the good stories about the people who are already doing it. Who is catching the bus and why? And, what are the advantages? Who has moved to town and how much more time do they have to ride their mountain bikes and do the things they're most delight in doing?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next one is Penny Wardell, who is joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Penny. Can you hear? Yeah, your mute is on.
So how's that now?
Yeah, that's coming through. Come on here. Yep. Yes.
Yes, I can
Right.
hear you.
Yeah, we've read your submission on behalf of the Walking Commission. So we're in your hands. You have 10 minutes.
Right, no, that's good. And I thought if you did have any questions, perhaps that's the priority too, rather than me just talking. So just give me a heads up at any stage if you do. But I thought first I might just introduce you to the Walking Access Commission. Not everyone is aware of the Commission, and particularly that though we're called Walking Access, we advise in all areas of access. So that includes from vehicles, bikes, walking, the whole gamut. And we're the Crown agent responsible for providing leadership on outdoor access issues, with the role being to promote free, certain, enduring and practical access to the outdoors. And areas of expertise include land tenure, public access easements, public and private access rights. And you'll see that our website's got maps showing public and private land, reserves, recreational access routes, a knowledge base and educational material. And since the council websites often don't show those public access areas, they just sort of have lines indicating where there are things like unformed legal roads. So we get a lot of traffic from people who discover that, for example, there might be an access easement through adjoining a particular property or an unformed legal road. And we're involved in the establishment of walkways and can help with negotiating easement conditions. Now, a lot of my work in Te Tau Ihu has been making access recommendations that are included in Overseas Investment Office conditions of purchase for forests. And I've also been involved with paying grants to cover surveying and legal costs of creating new access, which is something we offer through a grant scheme, and work with the Melbourne, Nelson and Tasman councils and Waka Kotahi on a range of issues, including access disputes, promoting new access, and advising on where public access exists, and creating new access, which has mostly been through those Overseas Investment Office conditions of purchase. We've also been called in to offer neutral advice where there's been a dispute. Unformed legal roads is probably one of the main areas in our submission that we've recommended that the plan commit to creating an access-friendly unformed legal roads policy, which is consistent across the top of the South Island. My work's been made a lot easier here in that all the councils do engage with us on unformed legal roads. And you'll be aware that there's quite a large network of these across the top of the South Island, which have got significant current and potential future value. And they play a central role in planning to develop networks of connecting trails and access points, which allow people to get around the area by bike and foot. And in the past, you'll be aware that a lot of these unformed legal roads were stopped and amalgamated into neighbouring properties. And some of these we realise now would have provided very useful off-road cycle and walking routes. If you were able to look into the future, would have realised the importance of those. For example, in Marlborough, there are quite a lot of unformed legal roads which have been stopped through vineyards, which could have been incorporated into wine trails. And already the Commission has an MOU with the Tasman District Council that commits to a common approach on many access issues, including legal roads, which could be a good document for your committee to look at. And this includes queries about public access over legal roads. And to read from that MOU, the queries go to the Engineering Services Senior Executive Assistant, who provides information on current law. And those needing detailed responses or involving conflict are logged as customer services requests and assigned for response and follow-up. Within 2 weeks of receipt of a road access query, the council provides written advice on whether the road exists and public rights of access. This is sent to owners of adjacent land and land through which that road passes. Where there is a dispute, the Commission may be asked to negotiate to achieve a desired outcome. And also road stopping. The Council consults with the Commission about any circumstances which may permanently prevent or restrict public access on formed or unformed legal roads, and about ideas or initiatives to create or enhance public access on roads. In Marlborough District Council, road stop application forms include the following. The applicant needs to, particularly where the legal road proposed for stopping might be adjacent to a reserve or lead to a reserve, or is adjacent to or leads to a waterway, contact New Zealand Walking Access for input. The Nelson City Council has agreed to run all road stop applications past the Commission, although very few have been received, and I'm not sure whether this is because the system's not working too well or whether there are actually very few applications. But I'd probably run 2 or 3 road stop applications across my desk each month. And probably most of those we look at and then say we'll take no further interest, but there are cases where significant access would be lost if those roads were stopped. And the Commission's preference is engagement with Council when they first receive a road stop application, which is practice in, with Auckland Transport and the Wellington City Council, I'm told by my colleagues. And this leaves the Council to pass on decisions and recommendations to the applicant. Usually if there are concerns raised, applications are declined. And as you'll be aware, often unformed legal roads aren't practical to use. They may cross difficult topography or bisect a working farm or vineyard or orchard. And sometimes the Commission has stepped in to help in these cases by working with that adjoining landholder to look at an alternative route for that access and potentially the existing unformed legal road has been stopped, or sometimes just the fact that you've got marked alternative access is enough to take the pressure off the legal access. Another topic, active transport is a priority for the Commission, and we felt that walking and biking access we noticed that had been admitted as a key focus for the plan, and wondered whether this was because it was written ahead of the Climate Change Commission releasing its draft advice to government in January. And this included the following: ensure a coordinated approach to decision making is used across government agencies and local councils to embed a strong relationship between urban planning, design and transport so that communities are well designed, supported by integrated, accessible transport options, including safe cycleways between home, work and education. And the Commission also assumed that the share of the distance travelled by walking, cycling and public transport could be increased by 25% for walking, 95% for cycling and 120% for public transport, which is less of an issue for us, by 2030. And the Commission recommended that the safe provision of active modes of transport within and between regions be added as a focus. And we do acknowledge that a lot of attention is paid to those issues, but feel that maybe it needs to be elevated as a priority. And the good news reading the plan was the significantly higher proportion of commuting cyclists than average across Te Tau Ihu, but the bad news was the significantly higher number of fatal and serious injury crashes involving vulnerable users, with cyclists identified as being at a significantly higher risk in this area than other regions. And a 43% increase in road travel from 2001, and I actually wrote 1018, it should be 2018 of course, at a time when population increased 23%, must presumably have increased cyclists' vulnerability. The Commission supports the strategic objectives and policies in the plan around mode choices and safety with the suggested insertions. And we also recommend prioritising or strongly prioritising connecting cycle on-road and share path facilities. And I thought I'd just give you an example there, as I quite frequently use a cycle trail that runs from Blenheim through to Spring Creek, which saves me car journeys and gives me an opportunity to get fit, and it's quite a popular trail. But there's a very dangerous ride along Grove Road, especially at rush hour, to reach that trail with no real alternative. And I biked down there last week at a busy time, and a truck, well, just a recreational vehicle type truck towing a trailer was unaware that the trailer's wheels had completely intruded into my cycle lane, and I had to quickly scramble up onto the footpath. And also there were several vehicles trying to exit businesses, completely blocking that lane. So that's a good example of where there needs to be very strong emphasis given on connecting that path so that people aren't having to bike down probably one of the most dangerous roads in Blenheim to get there on State Highway 1. And there are quite a few examples like that around Marlborough where I'm most aware of the roads and cycleways, as I'm a regular user. In the summertime, I spend time helping a friend run a wine cycling business and do some guiding. And there too, I'm alarmed that wine tourists and also locals commuting between towns are having to bike along the very narrow old Renwick Road and busy Raporo Road. And I can see on our mapping system that there are many vineyard headlands extending into road reserve, and there seems to be a good alternative there.
We're just about out of time, Benny, so any additional points you wish to bring up?
Probably the only two, just very briefly, where I'm wondering whether I was correct in my analysis of those figures that suggested 7 times more was being spent on walking and biking in Nelson and Tasman and Marlborough. If that is the case, I don't know if I missed something. I felt that was a real pointer that more needs to go to this region, and also the stressing tangata whenua consultation, which may already have happened or may be active. And other than that, that pretty much covers what I was wanting to say.
Any questions? I think, in light of your written submission and what you've said today, I think it's very, very clear of the submission you're making and the points you wish to bring to the committee's attention.
Oh, that's good. And did I understand those figures correctly? That's a question for me, because I thought it was quite a dramatic difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to get checked with the officers.
No, we'll carry forward.
Yeah,
Not now.
no, but not now. But we can get that back to you.
Yes, no, that's fine. If you'd get back to me on that, I'd be interested. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you for the opportunity to zoom in.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to make your submission.
That's fine. Okay, bye.
Good. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Next, we have Sue Sarah and George Truman from Waimea, Nelson. As you'll be aware, you're representing an organisation, so have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Yes, pleased to sort of be back in Nelson to be able to address it. It was a last minute whip through of notes last night. As I state, A4A means accessibility for all and social isolation. They're both things that seriously impact on our seniors. The two items cover the concerns of grey power. And already senior residents of Muritai Street are facing issues negotiating their driveways since the little used cycleway was introduced. No longer can visitors park nearby. Meals on Wheels, Home Help, etc. are all left searching for spaces to visit these people, as is family members who can't have to walk or want to go and take their family out for the day. Some are backing onto the street, risking hitting the pedestrians because they can't safely back up their drives with the concrete islands in the way. And this is because to back out, they've got to back over the pedestrian walkway, then the cycle walkway, then out past an island, which puts them right in the middle of the street, and it's very dangerous. For someone to suggest moving a bus lane from Muritai to Tahunanui Drive beggars belief. This will further impede the independence of those most effective. And I'm really going back to this handout that was given out at the Tahunanui Business Association meeting. To walk from Muritai, Roto, Green Streets, and those that live at Abbeyfield and Martin Close, to walk up to Tahunanui Drive and then cross over a main road to catch a bus is absolute stupidity beyond belief. It's all well sitting in an office outside drawing up these plans, and that was stated at the meeting in Tahuna that a lot of this wasn't even done here. So since the change in parking restrictions in Muritai Street, and now there is talk in these plans of it also being introduced to Parkers Road, it's just going to exacerbate an already severe shortage of parking in the Tahuna, in that area, working area. Nilmac staff now use up just about every available space there is in Parkers Road and Muritai Street. They've run out of room, so now they're parking in Tahunanui Drive as well at the top end so that they can walk around down to Bullen Street. So I'd like to see the council look at small working buses for their council contractors, perhaps. The plan given to those at the Tahunanui meeting shows the plan for hybrid route 2 to be selected. It has to be the only option when you look at it in here. You've got to stay on the Muritai Street, up Parkers Road onto Annesbrook Drive to venture out that way. To go via Pascoe Street is obviously nobody's actually tried going down there after 3:30, 4 o'clock. Good luck to you if you're going to try and take a bus down there as well. The implementation of smaller buses, like low emission buses, running on more frequent timetable would hopefully start to solve some of the issues. And I'd like to suggest that this looks at being started as soon as possible. The single low fare is a win-win situation. This enables our pensioners and has senior citizens to know what it's going to cost them. It's not going to go up next week. The plans for the CBD to the airport bus service via Gulf Road would certainly pay benefits to the council. It's got to work. It's a win-win. And that depends on, can you gain access into the airport with a business of the bus shuttle that's already operating there, and they pay, I believe, a license to enter the airport premises. So in saying so, Grey Pat is asking the Nelson City Council and the TDC to please start considering the ever-growing seniors of Nelson and Tasman in all consultations on these plan changes. I said life is not all about cycleways. It is always going to be those, for some reason, biking is out of the question. Having lived on Tahunanui Drive for nearly 18 years, I know the amount of cyclists who are still coming down the footpath, including the gentleman who banged on my passenger's door the other day while I was waiting for a break in the traffic. I put my window down. He said, back up. I said, cross over and use the cycleway. He said, I don't want to go down there. I'm going this way. I said, will you wait until I'm ready? Probably took off. So this is their attitude. They do not want to detour down Parkers Road, down along Muritai Street and back out. It's just too easy to scream down to Tahunanui Drive. So I would say, if you look at these plans and you're thinking of moving the bus lanes from Muritai Street, please forget it. Let's think of our seniors for once. I don't know if George has got anything else he'd like to add. Okay, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, we've got time for questions. Councillor Edgar.
Eugene?
Thanks so much. So you've mentioned you're not the only one. The plan given to those at recent Tahunanui meeting.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a copy of that.
Right, there's the 3 proposed plans.
Yep.
They were handed out to us. So I don't know, it was a council staff member that handed them out.
It's not in our current, no, okay. It would be great if all members of the committee could get a copy of this, please. Thank you. I'll let you keep yours and start.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was unaware you didn't have those.
Okay. No questions? Thanks so much, Sue and George. Good to see you again. And yeah, point you made, well made. Great, thank you. So I'll break the meeting, morning tea break, about 20 minutes. got a few submitters here that are sort of ready to go, so we'll take advantage of the getting back a little bit earlier. Right. Well, welcome back. Our next submitters is it Karen or Mike? And is it Corin? No. Okay, I'll come forward anyway. Representatives of Blind Citizens New Zealand, Nelson branch. So we've read your submission, so take that as a given. And we're in your hands.
Hello, Mayor Rees, councillors. I'm Mike Stevens, representing Blind Citizens New Zealand, Nelson branch. Now, one of our members would have liked to have spoken to you today, but she's unfortunately having an eye operation. So I will, Corin Owen was going to speak, so I will ask our secretary, Lynane Kent, to read Corin's words.
Good morning. Sorry. Good morning. This is a statement about Corin's personal experiences with bus transport in March 2021. And she says, I am a Richmond resident. With the challenges of increasing loss of vision, I rely on bus transport to enable me to live my life as independently as possible. The introduction of the Richmond Loop bus routes has helped with this. Unfortunately, though, I have often missed the Loop bus, sometimes by less than a minute. This is very frustrating, especially if I have groceries to carry home. However, I recently had two very unpleasant experiences. Last month, having been to a medical appointment in Nelson, I once again saw the Loop bus pull away as the Nelson bus moved in behind it in Richmond. On leaving the bus, I conversationally expressed my frustration and disappointment to the driver, who curtly replied that I shouldn't be travelling in peak hours. There are times, though, when this is not possible, and I miss connections are not always in peak times. I felt demoralised and severely reprimanded by the tone of the comment. Only 2 weeks later, just after midday, I was heading home from a meeting in Stoke. The bus then didn't stop across the road from the TTC as it normally did, but carried straight on. As soon as I realised this, I pressed the buzzer. I was confused, so I asked the driver why she didn't stop. Instead of an apology, I was told to take responsibility myself and always press the buzzer when I wanted to get off. Evidently, I was the only passenger on board and she hadn't seen me. She was heading to the depot for her lunch break. A different driver, another reproachful reply. This time, I honestly felt like crying. The comment was unfriendly, unfair, and I felt totally despondent. On both occasions, I was wearing a badge indicating that I am visually impaired. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynane. It's issues like that and other issues which I won't go through too many of, but like safe road crossings to get to bus stop shelters that are preventing quite a lot of our members from using the public transport system. That means less people on the buses, but it's lost opportunities for our members. And these lost opportunities can increase the sense of social isolation that these people have. It's not only loss of opportunities for our members, but it's also for shops and businesses and events that they may have otherwise come to. So when you are building a new, better and inclusive public transport system, I urge you to consider the issues raised and suggestions made in our submission. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Lorraine. Question from Councillor Edgar.
Hello, Mike. Judine Edgar. just the, you've mentioned the hail and ride flags. Can you tell me a little bit about those, please?
Well, yes, they have been a little bit of a semi sort of a joke in a way. They were issued, I think, by council and were available, I think, from the library. When you are standing at the roadside hoping to pick up one of the loop buses, Richmond and Stoke, you wave one of those flags. As one of our members said, he now knows most of the, because of his poor vision, knows most of the people in the camper van community. But the bus drivers are supposed to recognise that and stop. And that's because we're not so sure that it is a bus coming along, perhaps.
Right, yes, because that was sort of going to be my next question is, yeah, but how would you know, if it is the bus? So the hail and ride service is still problematic for you, isn't it?
Yes.
And then just my other question is I just wanted to check. So accessibility for all your active members of that. And so did staff come and talk through the regional public transport plan proposals? You know, did you hear about it through accessibility for all, or how did you find out about the regional public transport plan changes?
Not sure, possibly knowing that our Nelson, which we've managed to get in large print around the libraries and things. I think that's how we probably found out to make a submission.
Okay, so we need probably a bit more engagement with A4A around these changes.
Yes.
Chair, can I answer that question? Karen Wilson from Blind Citizens. We heard about it before the A4A. At the last A4A, a summary of the regional public transport plan was put to the forum. So it just reiterated what we our understanding.
Wonderful.
Karen.
Thank you very much.
Just remembering with our ageing demographic that this group of people with disability issues is increasing.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Mike and Ryan.
No, thank you for your time.
No, really appreciate it. Really appreciate your input.
Thank you.
I don't see the Nelson Youth Councillors were up next, but I don't see them.
Oh, they're in the, see, there's a whole lot in the thing of the scope.
Yeah, Petra's, they're coming now. Come on in. Yeah, take a seat there. Well. Yeah. The rest of the youth councillors want to take a seat, or? Okay. Great to see you all again. We're in your hands. We've read your submission.
Awesome. Kia ora, my name is Will Irvine. I'm from Nayland College. I'm here with James Overmere and Isla Kennard from Garran College and Nelson College for Girls, as well as Darcy Laurie from Nelson College, Astrid Sayer from Nayland, Janvi Harrison from Garran, Malika Rai from Garran, and Rasika Sapkota from Nelson College for Girls. We are representing the Nelson Youth Council. I trust you all had the chance to read our submission. We have outlined the changes that we'd like to see the councils and the panel here today implement in order to make our transport system safer and better for young people throughout the region. However, today we'd like to draw your attention to an issue that we touched on that we believe needs to be heard in person. We know this sits slightly outside the range of the submission that we've made, but we would like you to hear what we have to say. Youth are among the biggest users of the N-bus system, which we view as an extremely valuable asset to the region. However, as we've mentioned throughout the years, we see a vast room for improvement in the system. Sometimes, as adults who use the bus system maybe once a month, it is very easy to forget the real issues that face those who use it every day, often the most vulnerable in our community. That being said, we've collected real experiences from members of the council that we'd like to read to you now. We think it's important that you hear the real voices and complaints of Nelson youth. While we're aware that for many on the panel today, this will not be relevant as it does not immediately affect your sections of this plan, we would like to use this opportunity to speak to the issues that concern us. That being said, we'd like to read from a list of complaints that members of the Nelson Youth Council and the community have had around the system. On several occasions, buses that were empty or half empty have driven straight past my stop and left me stranded.
Bus drivers have been over 5 minutes early and I've missed work.
When I first moved to Nelson, I didn't know how the bus system worked. I was at the Nelson depot and asked if the bus went through Stoke. The bus driver rudely and aggressively commented, "What do you think? Where else would I go?" This definitely made me avoid using the bus system.
Bus drivers often speed past the spot, even if they are early, meaning that people who arrived on time or even minutes before actually missed their bus.
I was once 5 minutes early to the bus stop, and as I arrived, it sped past, so I had to wait for the next bus.
Bus drivers have snapped and yelled at me and other students for taking too long to put bikes on the front of the buses.
And we've got the bus driver was always in a bad mood, and whenever I hopped on the bus, she would sometimes start driving while I'm still getting a seat, making us fall over a couple times.
Based on these comments and the discussions we've had with members of the community, we see a need for change in 3 main areas. Firstly, we would like to implement a rule where bus drivers must stop and wait at a bus stop until the time specified on the bus timetable, regardless of whether there is anyone there or not. We believe that this will be extremely important as it will allow people to feel more confident in using the buses rather than viewing them as a hit or miss event. Secondly, we'd like the two major bus routes to operate on an hourly basis on the weekends. Weekend buses are always packed with Nelsonians due to the high demand in this, and we believe that the lack of service in this area severely impinges the freedom of movement that youth in other cities get to enjoy. Thirdly, we would like the M-bus drivers to undergo sensitivity training. We do not believe that travelling to and from places in Nelson should place us at a risk of verbal tirades based on the mood of our bus driver. We feel that this area is lacking in the M-bus system and we would like to see it improve. James will now elaborate on the reasons as to why we would like to see these systems changed.
Thank you, Isla. Well said. Nelson is going to grow significantly over the next 10 years, and we need to cater and support that growth if Nelson is to come out of this COVID-caused economic and social recession even stronger than ever. With a constantly rising population, which, don't get me wrong, is a good thing, provided we can, provided Nelson can maintain equal pace. Traffic congestion will become significantly more problematic, and therefore Nelson roads will become forever more reliant on the increased use of public transport for a multitude of reasons, of which the most important being a significant increase in carbon emissions by cars, and chains of traffic stretching larger distances, thereby blocking road exits. But a full bus could hold the same number of people as 7 cars or more, give or take, and it would take up half the length of the road, which could be the difference between a blocked roundabout and an environmentally friendly and safe drive home. But people won't use these buses if they've had a bad experience before, or perhaps they see the Nelson public transport system as unreliable because of that one time the bus didn't arrive on time, on the time specified by timetables at the bus stops or on the Nelson Bus website page. However, the opposite may also be true. Everyday buses leave minutes earlier than the time specified by the sources mentioned prior, leaving people stranded before work and sports events. This is an important issue and council needs to address it. It needs to address it if people are going to use the public transport systems more often, specifically buses. Thank you to the panel for granting, we also had a story about how youth feel unsafe biking on roads, and once one teenager has a bad experience on a bike on the road and then they tell their friends, then it's going to just diminish the amount of people using their bikes more and more. Thank you to the panel for granting Youth Council this opportunity to speak to the submission. It is an important issue for both Nelson Youth and the future of Nelson alike.
Thank you, panel, for their time. We're now open to any questions.
Certainly, we've got plenty of time for questions, so I'm sure there will be a couple. Janine?
Thanks, guys. You commented on the weekend bus service, but nothing about the weekday one. So just wondered if you had any, or if you'd had any discussion as, you know, the full Youth Council about the proposed changes either to the routes or the times for the weekday services.
I think we have had discussion around this area. The general consensus that we had was that the effort being put towards these changes was somewhat misdirected, as we believe that the major accessibility problem for youth is that youth use buses on the weekends, and that it's unviable for them to use it given the current timetable.
Thank you.
I just wanted to tease out about the weekend service being hourly. I can understand sport on Saturday morning and you want to go out in the evenings and things, but what about Sunday morning? Are you all sleeping in like we used to as teenagers, or are you still wanting an hourly service on a Sunday morning?
The hourly service is important because on Sundays we get 2 days off school in a week, and so we like to maximise that time for social reasons. So it is an important issue.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. Just in relation to students who are living west, I know that probably most students from Tasman west would go to Motueka High School, but moving this way to Mapua, I just wondered about, we've had a lot of feedback saying that people want buses from Mapua into town, and so I'm assuming that Mapua will come to Richmond, to Waimea. Students from Mapua will come to Waimea, but do you have any idea about the ideal time that a bus would need to leave from, say, Mapua to get to school in time?
So I don't think we have any representatives on our council who live in Mapua, so that might be a bit of a difficult question for us to answer. I don't think we have any. Yeah, sorry.
Kia ora. I just know in the written submission you talk about with the phase plan, step 1, step 2, step 3, wanting to see steps 2 and 3 brought forward. Are there any specific things that we've currently got sort of out later on, or just those things that you think we should be getting right straight away and doing as soon as possible?
To be honest, I do not know. I can't answer that question. Yeah.
I think it's all good. Probably one question I've got is that one of the themes that's come in really strongly with your submission is the need for a reliable fixed. So is there any other alternative? You got any alternative about how that might be fixed rather than you said about stopping and waiting, but is there any other suggestions you might have?
The most viable alternative, I think, at the moment that we have is access to the transit app, which is effectively the only other way that students or any people can know when their bus is going to arrive. But we think that this is an over complication of a system that really can be quite simple if people look at the times on their timetable and their bus arrives at that time. That's the ideal system that we'd like to use, and we think that what we have proposed is one of the best ways that we can think of to achieve that.
Okay, so it's reliability and the general feeling of safety at the bus stops?
Safety and accessibility, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Well, no more questions. Thank you very, very much for your very considered and comprehensive submissions, and Good points, well made. Next, we have Mr. Peter Carlton. Either one will do. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It seems like an interesting thing, the transportation. It's at the core of, you know, being human, isn't it? Moving around and having accessibility to things. And this was inspired for me because I was hearing a lot on the radio, a lot of issues coming up that I felt, well, this kind of sort of gets a tick from everything. Issues regarding the barriers of participation in community, mental health of the community, issues that the young are facing, the issues that the elderly are facing, and the issues that our businesses are facing. And thinking about in a couple of years' time, obviously things will be, we all hope, rolling along as normal again with numbers and things. And assuming that happens, along with technological advances that have made buses something else. I've recently had an experience up in Waiheke Island, which will sort of reinforces where I'm coming from. And that is where you don't spare the horses and you make a community service that is, you know, of world standard. Firstly, I break it down into three main important areas for me, and that is the elderly, the young, and the business. And everybody else will benefit from it, from that. Firstly, the elderly need their independence as long as possible, ideally. You know, that's what we all want. We all want to stay independent. Not having to own a car or maintain a car is a huge financial freedom. You know, that's a large burden that gets put onto everybody, in particular the rural areas. So there's the social connection for the elderly by getting it into an environment that is mixing up people a lot. That's the young getting to see the elderly getting to see the young, and the mothers with their babies. These are sort of experiences that, you know, you just can't put a price on that sort of thing in someone's day. So it's that community connection for the elderly. Their mental health, for the elderly, being able to get out of the house and not feeling reliant on somebody else to be able to move about is an important thing in life. And it's less stressful. I followed a few elderly people here in the car all the way from Golden Bay, and you know, you could see them. They're giving their friends rides, and and it's such a busy road out there. Who wants to be driving at 80 or 90? You know, now it might be a better option when the buses of the olden days, but we're talking about, you know, $500,000 to $1 million bus that can lower itself down to the ground, that can put out a ramp for a wheelchair. These are the sort of buses that are needed. Anything else is just sort of, you know, we're sort of stuck in the sort of past. And so it really frees up people's ability to get out, right? So they also access all the services. How am I going for time? Because I want to cover those other areas. There's access to all the services with a bus. 2 minutes left, okay. And then there's the young, right? Enabling them independence from their parents. Having been a parent myself, 2 young ones, there's the sports and all the facilities and their friends that they can get to once they have got home from school. The financial freedom from a young person, this is where the future is. We don't need to own cars in the future. We can have autonomous cars are coming. 20 years, you'll be sharing a car with, you know, if you needed it. But the bus will be a great interim as well as, you know, part of the system. So anyway, school, after school connections, there's the friends and sports events, added security by having a regular safe bus service running around is just a must for everybody's security, really. It means you can get out of a troubled situation at home just because you know there's a bus there you can get on and you can go and see your uncle or your auntie or something like that. So many, I mean, it's all in the details. You know, I could go on about the details, but it's all in those details. And there's details details with each one of these points that I'm trying to make here, but obviously I don't have time. But so there's the added security, a meeting hub. A bus can be a meeting hub with modern Wi-Fi and screens and things. The young will actually want to get on them. They want to meet on them. They can check the town out. They can see the scenery. They can explore. And I think for Tākaka, this is essential. Again, mental health comes into it. So it's a tip for mental health for the young as well. Businesses. Now, this is really important. Businesses, you know, we're only catering for people that are really mobile. And there's so much more on offer when people can get out the door. Cafes and restaurants and all that sort of bars and stuff would massively benefit from all those people that just don't have the means to get into town and maintain themselves for a long day, say, and still have to drive home again and what have you. So you can get into cafes. People can come home from work, leave the car, leave the stress behind, get on the bus and go and have a nice dinner out and have a few drinks and actually really relax, not having to worry about drinking and driving. It means businesses can open up all the way along the bus route. Now, for Tākaka, that's a huge thing. You know, I mean, it means backpackers can actually get a direct connection with the tourist again. Because at the moment, with the van culture, the buses are encouraging people who don't just want to do their own thing and stop anywhere. That's okay. Well, there's actually another tourist out there that actually enjoys mingling with people and getting on the bus services and exploring at depth using local bus services to get around and see the community, because actually that's where all the sites are. Golden Bay could, for example, have one of the finest community bus services anywhere in the country, rivaling Queenstown, you know. So why we don't even have a bus service, I don't understand. But getting back to those backpackers that can get connected with the businesses, because at the moment they don't connect with them. They don't arrive here in that fashion. And so the ventures along the road, less cars on the road would be a safer community for all. Advertising opportunity for the council. I mean, imagine the bus, you can fill it up with all your businesses and all your various things and information coming in and keep people real time. There's also that connection. It takes tourists right to the backpackers, and from there they can connect with those tourist operators. At the moment, they don't get connected with the tourist operators because they avoid places where they get connected with tourist operators. And it's not really by design, it's just by default. You know, we don't offer services for people that don't want to drive. It means people can fly here and just cruise about in their own good time without even rental cars. Sure, that I'm not taking away all the other opportunities, but this will open up a huge area of elderly that don't want to drive. They don't want the tour buses. They've still got a little bit of independence. It's a world market. And one last thing, this creates income for a whole new sector. There's the drivers, there's the mechanics. I estimated it costing $250,000 a year to operate the service. At $670 a day, it seems like a huge plus for just $670 a day. And I think the last one on there is reducing freedom camping numbers, less vans taking up parking spaces. And the government did ask the local councillors to find a more sustainable way of having tourism. And, having a really linked bus service would be it would be a game changer for this area. And we all know how appalling Nelson's been in the past when it comes to air quality. Those are huge factors, and also connectivity. I've been through here for over 40 years of my life around this area, and it has been an absolute nightmare to get around. You hitchhike and you have to sort of, all that kind of thing. So trust me, a really good bus service running every hour would be a game changer. All right, thanks. That's all right. Sorry to take a little more than 5 minutes. That was. Any questions?
Well, we're out of time, so.
Oh, sorry, you're out of time for questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right.
Got a couple of people up there waiting after you. So
I was hoping it wasn't going to be a waste of time, and we'll.
Thank you very much. I think
Thank you very much.
Some really good points.
Maybe they can listen back to it.
Yeah. Next we have Karen Dennery. Welcome, Karen. You can take a seat. I think it's just you here today, isn't it?
No, I haven't got my family with me today.
You haven't got?
No.
Okay then.
Kia ora mai tātou. My name is Karen, ko Karen Naho. I'm here on behalf of my family, my husband Stuart and my two kids, Alice who's 5 and Oliver who's 9. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate your time and all that you do for our city. As residents of Todd's Valley and North Nelson, my family and I especially wish to thank you for the role you played in supporting Waka Kotahi NZTA in reducing that speed limit on that main road to 80 k's an hour. It's played a huge part in getting us to feel much more safe on those roads, whether we're biking or we're in a car or walking to the Waka Flat. So thank you very much for that. But today I'm here to talk about buses. So as a family, like many others in our area, we are really keen to do as much as we can to reduce our carbon footprint and help our environment. For transport, we really want to have the opportunity to take the bus to town instead of driving all the time. My kids are very excited about the idea. And we'd like to be able to take our bikes with us so that when we're in town, we can get around a bit more easily and we can go to the beach and things like that. We ask you, our council, to please consider extending the current Atawhai service another 1.9 k's to Todd's Valley and using those fantastic bike racks on the buses so we can carry bikes and keeping the fares viable so that it's a cheaper option than a car, or at least on a par would be good. Now, I know that one of the first things we all wonder is, would there be enough demand to justify this bus service and the costs it would entail? I wondered this too, so I've done a little bit of thinking about it and I'll share what I know from my quick look so far with you. So the first of all is Todd's Valley, even though it might seem small from a glance up the valley, it's actually bigger than you think. There are currently about 150 households in Todd's Valley, so that equates to around about 333 people. It's grown steadily in the 7 years we've been here and it is still growing. That's quite a few people to add to the pool of possible customers for the existing buses. And no one likes seeing empty buses going up and down those roads, right? So let's maximise the benefit of running them and get more people on them. Turns out my family is not alone in this idea. From asking a few neighbours in the last week or so and flagging the idea very briefly this week on 1 or 2 small local Facebook group pages, I received responses from about 60 different respondents pretty quickly, with a big resounding yes, all very supportive of bus service into North Nelson. So these responses were from throughout North Nelson, so just in Todd's Valley, up to Glendowen, the Glen, and as far as Hedda. I acknowledge that this was not an in-depth survey. I've just done a few days asking, but and I know that there are more specific details that you and we all would like to know. So, for example, how frequently would people use the bus? Which days would they use it? Which times of the day? How many times in a month? That kind of thing. This, however, would be a very easy next step to ask those questions, and I'm offering my help to help with this, obtaining from the community if you'd like that. In the context of Nelson City's stated climate emergency, which we totally applaud, thank you for that, and the excellent responses that you're planning and taking already, a bus service to include households within 10 to 15 minutes drive of the city is a very sensible action to help reduce our carbon footprint as a city. Let's get more people on the buses and bikes and out of cars. In addition, a bus service would support the connectedness and independence of the older folk in our community, as well as the growing number of teenagers. It's a lot of growing families at the moment in Todd's Valley, as well as Glendowen and the rest of North Nelson. So my conclusion is, with the support indicated so far in the context of the city's genuine desire to get more people on bikes, buses and other kinds of transport, the idea of a bus service extended to include Todd's Valley, maybe other places up the road there, is definitely at least worth a closer look. And I hope that you'll feel the same. We're really keen, just to finish off, we're really keen to hear what else you would want to know, all of you, in order to support this idea. And as I've said earlier, I'm happy to help with obtaining more information from the community if that would be of use to you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Karen. Have we got a bit of time for a couple of questions? What I've got, was it 6 or 60 responses?
60.
60.
Yes, 60, 60. All different people, so probably different households.
Very impressive. Councillor Dowler?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just wondering about school buses and that. Would a public transport system help with school bus routes, or what would happen there? Is it? I'm not familiar with where your kids go to school, whether they do it at Top Valley or come to Attawai or what. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'm afraid I don't know about school bus systems because we're homeschooling. So, yeah, thank you though. We can ask the community.
Yep, very, very clear, succinct proposal.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you for your time. Kia ora.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. Next, I'll see Mr. Gilbertson, Mr. Matheson up the back there. You want to come forward? So,
This is what I call the bus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Acknowledge the mayor. Morning for the second time. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the joint committee on our submission, which I presume I used to say this, and I presume that you've all read. We deliberately kept it short so that you wouldn't get too confused. We've got some real concerns. First of all, to you, Mr. Chair, I have to thank you for allowing an extension of time for the Tahuna Business and Citizens Association to make a submission. We were not consulted at all originally, and we did have some real concerns about 2 or 3 issues with regard to the regional public transport plan. First of all, the 2 I'm going to talk about is the present route down Muritai Street. Now, Mr. Chair, you attended the public meeting of which nearly 80 people, I think, turned up to discuss this issue, and you heard their concerns about safety. First of all, what we have at the present time with the bus service going down Muritai Street is we have a buffer for children attending the school and other places down there in safety. The proposal is to shift those bus routes onto Tahanui Drive, which we feel has a risk factor to it, which is unnecessary because the service we have at the moment works very well, and it connects people from Tahanui right through to Dunedin itself. So and to Stoke. So we don't have a problem with the service, and we think if it's not broken, don't change it. Secondly, we continue to oppose any form of restricted parking in Tahanui Drive. Tahanui Drive is not a highway to the city. It's actually a community of people with interest. It is also a commercial centre. If clearway zones are reintroduced after their failure from the last exercise, we will strongly oppose them. You can't restrict parking in Tahanui Drive for people wanting to attend to the doctor or to the medical centre or to any of the retail shopping places between Tahanui Drive and Annisbrook. It would be totally detrimental to any of the livelihoods or most of the livelihoods that are based there now. I think we did a submission, and I think you had it the other day, on the wider issue of transport through Annisbrook and Tahanui. And one of the major problems, and we all know that, is that we have an increasing number of heavy traffic travelling between the Waimea Basin through to the port. And until we collectively solve that problem, really, quite frankly, you're going to have these restrictions and they will grow. So our main concern is, if it's not broken, don't touch it. We certainly believe the bus route at the moment serves it services the older population who are wishing to get to supermarkets in Stoke, and it also looks after the kids attending school. So no to that, and strongly opposed to any clearway zones which failed before being reintroduced into Tahanui Drive and Annisbrook. John.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Sure. I guess my concern is that we mentioned in our submission it's fine as it is, the route as it is, moving through to Stoke. I'm very concerned to read in the plan that you're actually, well, in one place in the plan you talk about building on the existing network, and then in the next paragraph you talk about withdrawing the Stoke loop, the Stoke loops, and then you try. It looks like you're trying to replace the what I would call the Nayland, Monaco, Somerset, that bottom loop, by taking the coach down Nayland Road and then Songer Street. I don't know who drew these plans. Do they actually live in Nelson? That's a question I ask. Where did these plans come from? Because it looks very much to me like it was a desktop operation. Oh, look, there's a route there, we can use that, because they obviously don't know about the way the suburb of Nayland and Stoke operates. So we're very concerned that you should leave the route alone. It's working well. If you increase the frequency, which is also in your plan, I'm sure that will assist somewhat. I know this morning I had to wait. And I had to select the time. Would be much better if it was a bit more frequent. But the other concern I have is that for some of you, I heard somebody before speaking about the elderly population. Now it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have a major concentration at the moment on cycles and being independent on cycles and what have you. And you look at the demographic of Nelson and you see how it's aging. And if you want to maintain the independence for the elderly, they won't be doing it on bicycles, I'm sorry. They may be doing it on motorised scooters. I've ordered mine to be a fast one. But I think that we need to be careful about overemphasising the cycle thing. I think it's a really important step, but you've got to think about where the population is going. And to remove the Stoke Loop, which goes out around Somerset and some of the other areas in that bottom Nayland area, to me makes no sense. And to say that you're going to institute it as a dial-a-ride type of facility, you're basically going to make a bus route into a taxi route. So I'd have to say it's not building on the network, it's actually withdrawing a service that I think if you want to encourage it, you need to maintain it, not get rid of it. And don't try and take the Tahuna coach through the proposed hybrid, I think they were calling it a hybrid route, Sue, at the meeting, down the Annisbrook roundabout, down to Mitre 10's Megastore corner or the Junction corner, and then turn left into Nayland Road. Because if any of you have ever been down that road, you will know that it's impassable at some times. So no service, nobody with any sense would put a bus service on there on a regular basis, because it will make your timetable impossible. So, that's the two things. And the other question I have is, have you looked at altering where the Tahunanui coach service that comes into town, that I came into town on, goes when it gets into town? Because at the moment what it does is it goes out there. And most of the elderly people that we have in our community and the lower socioeconomic people don't have cars, and we don't have a supermarket. And so where do they want to do? So they come to town to do their shopping in the supermarkets. And the buses go absolutely nowhere near the supermarkets. And with a slight alteration to the route at this end, taking it, instead of turning into Halifax Street, taking it past the warehouse and Countdown, and then turning into Gloucester Street past the fire station and round that way to get to the bus depot, you would achieve that service, and you may find you get a greater number of people. This morning there were 15 people on the coach that I came in on. So you may find you get more people. Some of the people that I spoke to on the coach were actually coming in to do their shopping and to go to Wins. So I think it needs a wee bit of jigging and what have you. And as far as going out into Richmond, I think it's vital that the services that are coming in on an express service from Richmond and from Motueka, if they're all linked, it's vital that they are an express service and they don't try and come around to Hunanui Drive. But, yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Paul. Probably time for a couple of questions. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Paul. Hearing you loud and clear on those getting those routes right, I just wanted a little clarification on just a couple of things in your written submission. You highlight that the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Might miss out people. Do you have any ideas on what sort of timings you think would be better?
Part of the reason for making that, part of the reason for making that statement, Rowan, is that a lot of the people that were at our public meeting were talking about the number of people that work at Nelmac and in that industrial area close to there. There's the fish processing company and those sort of things, and they all bring their cars and then they park them all down the bottom end of Muiratai Street and along Parkers Road, which is clogging up the parking for the residents. I see some of the residents behind us. So, I mean, part of that was if you want to, it says in the document, you want to encourage people not to take their cars to work, but to come on a bus, then you're going to have to look at those industries. And we were suggesting that you may find you need to start the bus service earlier and run it later based on that premise. And I just want to make one other comment about that, is that if you're looking at a bus service, I don't know why anybody would do that, look at a bus service from the airport. Don't forget that the people that work at the airport largely work shifts. Okay, so it's not good for the staff at the airport to be running a bus service to the airport. It's not. It's going to be counterproductive. And you know, why did the shuttle bus operation go broke? Ask yourself.
And then just on the sort of the overall scale of investment that we've currently got, you mentioned in here sort of doing too much with too little. Is it your view we should be investing more in this or cutting some things out? And then sort of have we got that investment right in terms of the numbers?
I think the argument that was put up was if you had more money, you could do more. Our argument is with the money you've got now, look at the effects of what you're spending that money on. And I think this is one of the long-term faults of local government, is that they suddenly see a bright star in the sky that says, we will give you a subsidy if you like to match it. And suddenly you find that the efforts that you put in have actually been slightly misguided because they don't work. So as I said to Brian the other day, yeah, more money we can get you for alternative transport and to improve the roading and whatever is great. But the most important part is what effect will that expenditure have on the community that you're actually working in? And in this particular case, it's pretty obvious to everybody that there are some faults with these proposals because you don't need to change some things. They're actually working quite well. I mean, yes, you need to put more little cosmetic bits, but things like more shelters on the eastern side of Muiratai Street because there's none at all at the moment. And that's important because they're outside the schools and things. So we're not saying don't spend the money. We're just saying this time don't change these things, you know, and certainly don't disrupt the main road. People are going to have to understand it'll become more congested until they get and find other forms of transport getting from A to B. So it's actually working in some people's favour.
And my opinion is, supporting what he says, my opinion is that this is going to take more than you think. And the greatest thing I think you're going to have to do is run a really effective education program. You're going to have the mayor riding the bus and talking to people on the bus. You're going to have high-profile people on the bus, talking to people on the bus. Make it what that last gentleman said, a place that people will go to. And that's not going to happen on the budget you've got.
Thanks. Just a quick question that I've got. Your submission was silent on your view on the second route from the airport down Gulf Road and into town. Do you have a view?
You mean running the airport service?
Yeah, the airport service bus.
Oh, I think John touched on that.
You talked about most of the people, but the route, I was more.
Oh, the route itself.
Well, the route is ridiculous because it will push them through the intersection at the Sands, which we have been at council for the last 10 years to get something done about the road there. You'll know that.
Yeah.
And it pushes them through there, and then it takes them over the hill. And I think the only reason it does that is because it's trying to pick up the loop that's missing on the hill now in Washington Valley. So I think that, it's obviously been designed, as I say, by somebody from outside the region.
And I'll just add one other comment if I can, Brian, and that is I physically can't understand why you are considering Pascoe Street as a bus route. Going down there this morning, there's not an inch of parking availability anywhere in that road, and I think it would actually be quite dangerous.
Yeah. And one other point. I understand that council or the airport authority, and I guess that because they're council owned, were offered by one of the current providers of services from the airport, there only being one, were offered a shuttle service with a contribution coming from council, from this fund probably. So, and it's interesting that was turned down. That I know because of the contacts I have there. So it's kind of like, why would you want to dip your foot into something that's not economic, Brian? Yeah. It's nuts.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, Paul. I think you made your points very, very clear. And we've heard them. Thank you very much. Rachel. Welcome.
Yes. Here we go. I don't have to switch them on in Wellington. They have an automatic system. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Rachel Boyack toku ingoa. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am the member for Nelson, and I'm here this morning to present to you, to both councils on both plans. So I believe I've been given a reasonable amount of time. My intention is not to talk for too long, but actually to encourage some questions and engagement between yourselves and myself, because I think that will be most helpful. Can I just begin firstly to just congratulate both councils on working together for both the Regional Land Transport Plan and the Public Transport Plan. And I just want to thank the hard work that's gone in from elected members and from officials from both councils and also from Waka Kotahi and ZTA. I think it's a very good piece of work, both pieces of work, and I just want to thank you for the hard work that you've done. I'll begin by making some brief comments on the Regional Transport Plan and then probably spend a bit more time on the Public Transport Plan because I've got some more specific feedback to give on that. I've provided a written submission. I essentially want to make some comment from my point of view as the local MP on where I believe the councils and Waka Kotahi should be putting their support around strategic prioritisation for the region. Some of you may know that in one of my previous roles, I spent a considerable amount of time driving in a car throughout the region. As a union organiser, driving regularly out to places like Nelson Pine, driving to Golden Bay, to Murchison, across to Marlborough, between Nelson and Richmond at all sorts of times of the day, out to Motueka. And so I did this for 6 years in a car, and it gave me an insight into the transport challenges that we face across the entire region. And I know that both councils have their specific projects and specific angles that they look at. But I really want to encourage the continued work at a regional approach, because what we do in one part of the network impacts on another. And so you'll see in my written submission that the third project I've mentioned, which I believe is the area of our network which actually is the most congested, which is the most dangerous, and which needs the most urgent investment, and that is what I call the transport mess at Lower Queen Street. And I call it a transport mess because it's a transport mess. And it's not about laying blame here, but in my view, that part of the network is really problematic. When you're turning out to Nelson Pine and there's a very short right-hand lane there, and traffic gets backed up, it gets backed up onto the deviation. I recently took my new e-bike, which I've parked up outside, out to a meeting at Headingley Centre and biked along Lower Queen Street, which was an experience. And given that we have Nelson Pine there legitimately taking large trucks of pine trees down that road, given that we have commercial builds going on, we have residential builds, we'll have a school go in, we want to be encouraging people in that area to be using bikes, walking and public transport. It's my view that that particular transport project should be at the top of the list. And I know that not everyone around the table will agree with me on that, but this is where I believe the regional approach is necessary. I think there's a real safety risk for anyone walking and cycling in that area, and a real difficulty in encouraging public transport through that area as well. I'm not going to sit here with a whole lot of transport design solutions for you. That's not my role. That's the role of officials, to give you advice on what will work to improve safety and accessibility and reduce congestion in that space. But I just want to put on record that, and I've been saying this for about 4 or 5 years as well, I've been consistent on that. In terms of the Nelson area, I've been really clear in terms of Nelson Future Access Study that I'm very supportive of the stage 1 and stage 2 of what's been put on the table through the Nelson Future Access Study. So that is the short-term prioritisation of active transport and reducing congestion. I was in Queenstown recently and was very interested in what they've done for their bus network, which is around short little priority lanes of about 50 metres at the traffic light, sorry. So the buses can get through quickly in that part, but it doesn't disrupt the entire road, but just at that point. And I know that Queenstown Lakes have done a lot of work in putting in a single fare for buses and having a parking approach that has led to a greater uptake of public transport. And so I think what was good to see around that was that they hadn't had to do priority lane across the entire road. It was just a really short piece at the lights, and you could see how actually it did work really, really well. I also just want to comment on the need for us to sort the Nelson waterfront. That is a project that I'm really pleased to see has got support from across, I believe, the region. I was really pleased to see it separated out from the discussion of what we do in stage 3 of the Nelson Future Access Study, because I think having that connected to decisions around whether we do or don't do an inland route, I think that has held us back from being able to push for investment to the waterfront. We need to make it safe for walking and cycling. We need to make it resilient to climate change effect, and we need to improve the structural component of that. So I'm a full supporter of that. Getting to public transport specifically, since moving to Nelson in 2009, I have actually been presenting to council on the need for improved public transport. People who know me well will know I lived in Auckland for 8 years without owning a car, and in Wellington for 3 years also without owning a car. And during those times, I used public transport heavily. Prior to that, I was a high school cyclist in good old flat and windy Palmerston North. I haven't actually owned or used a car until moving to Nelson, and I have been incredibly frustrated, and again, not laying blame, but incredibly frustrated at the slow slow improvements we've made on public transport. And I know people have wanted to go faster and do more, but it has frustrated me. And I think we have an enormous opportunity. I think the plan is ambitious. I think it's fantastic. I've made some specific comments about listening to communities, about specific feedback, and I think that the presentation from the Te Hunanui community this morning has been incredibly helpful. I think they make some really valid points about the routes, and I think that listening to that engagement in specific communities. So Te Hunanui, I think there probably is some benefit in keeping the route where it is, although I can understand why you might want to lift the profile of the bus by putting it on the main road, but I think that the community should be listened to there. I also have questions about the removal of the Stoke Loop. I think there's some benefit to that loop that we should consider actually keeping that. I've also had people come to me wanting to see public transport extended out to Hira. And also ensuring that we have good public transport looks into the parts of the brook. So I think that you should hopefully be hearing from those communities, and I do ask that you listen to their feedback. The biggest piece of feedback I have on public transport in terms of what I'd like to see change in the plan is I'd like to see the frequency of the routes brought in earlier. I think 2026 is too late. And I think if you are seeking to get the best bang for your buck, to me, that is I think the biggest change we can make. But 5 years away to me feels too late. I'd like to see that done as soon as we possibly can. The chair will know that I missed a bus once after having a little chat to him in my driveway, and I planned to go and catch the bus, and we chatted for a little bit too long, and I walked down the driveway where I live on Waimea Road, and the bus sailed past, and it didn't come for another hour. And that happens to everybody all the time. And it discourages public transport use if you know you have to wait another whole hour. If I'd had to wait half an hour, I might have actually waited for the bus, but an hour I had to get in my car. And so by having the routes run a lot more frequently, that will allow people like myself who are busy, wanting to use the bus, but just find it difficult to use the bus because it's not frequent enough. And I think that's the fundamentally most important thing that you can do, and I really would urge you to do that sooner than what you are planning. I've made some other comments in my written submission around supporting low and zero emission buses, about accessibility, the importance of good passenger facilities. I'm really keen on seeing the bus stops improved. I've seen some in the past where you have a bus stop, and between the bus stop and the footpath is a big patch of grass in the middle of Stoke, and the people who are going to be using the buses in Stoke are often elderly, might have a walker, and having to push it over grass becomes difficult. And I think those types of considerations, so that people who are wanting to use the bus, one thing I don't agree with the previous submitters on is that elderly people don't want to use the bus. I think they do. And I think making sure the facilities work for people in wheelchairs and with walkers and who have accessibility needs is a really important way of ensuring they can access the bus. So on that note, I haven't been keeping an eye on my watch, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Rachel. There's a lineup of, I think, who worship the Mayor, and then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rachel, thank you very much for taking the time to come and present today and just expand on the submissions. And I really appreciate your support for the package. But certainly the feedback we've had so far today is that the public transport package isn't aspirational. It needs to go a whole lot further, and echoing the further and faster. That is going to cost some money. And I'm looking at our consultation document for the long-term plan, and we talk about the challenge for Waka Kotahi, who have signalled that the National Land Transport Fund is facing considerable funding constraints. They're pretty much out of money. So I guess my question for you as the MP for Nelson is really one of, or a message to say, we need a bigger vote for transport. We need a bigger vote for transport, for public transport and for active transport. And so my question really is, are you prepared to go back and advocate for us to get a bigger transport vote? Because if we're going to achieve many of the ambitions that we have for our region actually mean we need more central government money coming into this area. Otherwise, we'll just have the status quo, and we think we should be able to do better than the status quo.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And I think that what these two plans do alongside the long-term plans is get alignment across what are the strategic priorities. And then my job as your local MP is to go to Wellington and argue for increased funding for those priorities. And I see that as my role. And that's why I'm excited to see the improvement, the regional planning across public transport and regional planning, because it actually shows alignment across the region and a shared view. It makes it easier for me to go to Wellington and say, this is the, this is, and look, I've been really clear in my years in Nelson that I support increased funding for public transport. So yes, I see that very much as my role. If the council is saying we need more support, then it is my job to go to ministers and say we need more here alongside the councils. And also, if I think if the feedback from the community to council is they want to do more and go faster, then it does become a question as well in the long-term plans about where your priorities are in the long-term plans. And I'll be submitting on the long-term plans as well. And that, and I think those are also the conversations the councils have to have about priorities at that point too.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question on similar lines. You've mentioned the Rocks Road Walking and Cycling project, and in my discussions with Waka Kotahi, I give a sort of it's a project that it has been dear to my heart probably the entire time I've been involved in local government and before that. I was saying if I was to do a straw poll, I reckon I'd get upwards of 95% support for that project as an absolute priority for our region. And I'm just wanting to reflect in terms of, am I about right in that? I think that if I have to pick projects, you have a lot of conversations like I do with the public. There seems to be pretty universal support for that one.
Yeah, I think so. I think people have raised concerns about some elements of work on Rocks Road around whether it would be widened and what that would do to existing buildings like some of the cafes. And that needs to be part of the conversation, because when you improve the walking and cycling option, no doubt you have to probably add some width somewhere potentially. I mean, I'm not the person that does the detail on that, and I think those discussions have to be done in a really careful way around, because I know there's been a lot of misinformation put into the public domain about the potential for taking buildings away altogether, which is not true, and certainly not my intent. I know there's also conversations around things like the Cawthron chains that people feel a lot of connection to, and again, those conversations need to be done in a careful way because there is elements of history there. But I would agree with your 95% assumption. I think that the making the waterfront a beautiful place where people can walk and bike safely, where we feel as Nelsonians, when people come to visit the region, that they just say, what a beautiful spot, and I want to go for a run along the waterfront. I think that's something that the vast majority of us aspire to.
Thank you.
Councillor Egan.
Thank you. Look, I've got a couple of questions which are slightly outside your submission, so feel free to say whether you don't feel comfortable answering or don't have the information, but it's two things that have come up in a number of the submissions. One is express buses going from Richmond to Nelson along Whakatu Drive and Beatson Road, and with just, maybe one stop at the hospital or something like that, but just have that express bus service to make it more attractive, especially also not just for Richmond people, but if you've come from Wakefield or Motueka, if you're doing every stop all the way, it could be reasonably interminable. The other one is the 7 to 7 service. So we've got this 7 to 7, 7 days a week. Number of people have commented that 7 to 7 may be too narrow for a lot of working people. And I just thought, look, with your experience, you might be able to comment on just whether you thought that 7 to 7, especially Monday to Friday, was potentially too narrow.
I'll start with the 7 to 7 because, yes, I definitely would support it, particularly starting earlier. A lot of supermarket workers who I've had experience representing the shift start at 7. That's really common. And so I would definitely support that earlier. The express buses, absolutely, I think that's a game changer. I think if you think about particularly the network between Richmond and Nelson, specifically, if people know that they're going to get on a bus in Richmond, that it's not going to stop, maybe one stop, as you said, but not going to stop until Nelson City, just like a car, that reduces the time and improves the accessibility for people. I think that opportunities to have express buses from places like Motueka as well would be useful, but I think that if you're looking, say, at Wakefield, Brightwater, potentially, but you also got to make sure you're stopping in places that people want to get off. You know, there could be people coming in from Wakefield or Brightwater wanting to stop off in Stoke or in Bishopdale or the hospital. So you need to take a little bit of care, I think, there, and perhaps just do some official sort of research into what is needed. But certainly, I think I would be prioritising the Richmond to Nelson express service. I think that's where we can make some real differences. And part of that is improving those facilities in Richmond. I mean, well, there aren't facilities in Richmond. So, making the bus stop an interesting place to go. Sounds like, a slightly odd thing to say, but if it's somewhere where there's toilets and you can get a coffee and buy a newspaper or, those kinds of things as well, you actually create a place. It's a bit like going to an airport. The nicer the airport, more likely you might be to go. So I'd really encourage the Richmond one to be prioritised and the facilities around Richmond to be improved to support that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Rachel, just want to go back to where you started in your submission and follow on a little bit from where Mayor Rees was coming from. You talked about Lower Queen Street, and I think as jointly we've agreed that's one of the highest priorities across the region. And just wonder, obviously that includes Gladstone Road, and I'm not sure if you're aware, we've had 2 meetings with NZTA and other community groups trying to progress a business case to advance that. Obviously, Mayor Rees talked about a lack of funding from NZTA across the country. Will you be in a similar situation to lobby when that becomes an issue in front of you in Wellington?
Yes, and already have. Already have raised it with my colleagues that I believe that area would need funding support. And last year brought some MPs to actually have a look at that very area, and we actually had a good look at some of the housing developments, and TDC were very helpful in giving us some good information. So thank you for that.
I think becoming progressively worse by the day rather than the month or year now. So, but with all the development in Richmond West that you saw when you come with the MP, so we appreciate any support you have.
Yeah. Another comment I just make on that is I think you'll see from central government now, because that development began under the previous government, I just want to note that we are being very considered about housing developments to ensure that they have the infrastructure components considered as well. So not just the roads, but the Three Waters components. And that is the direction we're taking for exactly this type of reason. And I recognise that there's a bit of, I think probably I'd say tension in the region because around this project, because the project, I do want to push back a little bit on TDC, but the project going forward without necessarily a strong plan around the infrastructure, and I know people are keen to get houses up, but so there's a little bit of we're perhaps going to have to go and fix up something that happened a little bit, but I just want to put on record that central government's view is that when we're doing those large scale housing developments, we have to have good consideration, and it's why we put $3.8 billion into an infrastructure fund to support infrastructure for housing developments. Probably not retrospectively, I would say, but certainly for future developments that councils will have the ability to work with developers to apply for funding so that we don't get ourselves in that situation again.
Of course, we have had some infrastructure funding from the developers and put our own in towards likes of the Berryfield Drive intersection, but it's obviously the state highway that's the challenge.
I think that's the thing, it impacts on the wider network. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Rachel. And
Thank you.
see you around. Okay.
Yeah. How's that going?
Too much information. Right. Have Caroline Armitage from St. Stephen's Church. Good afternoon, Caroline. Got your submission this morning, so we've I think we've had a chance to have a quick read of it.
Yes, thank you.
Anyway, we're in your hands. You've got 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Madam Mayor, nice to see you again. Thank you for the opportunity to represent St. Stephen's here. It's the first time presenting to this council and other members attending, although I'm familiar with the process in Auckland, having relocated to beautiful Nelson from there, so I understand all the issues in Auckland. You have, I think, before you just some extra, just additional notes to my submission on behalf of the community church, together with a map to do with intensification. Because I'm the age I am, I don't rely on my memory, so I hope you'll excuse me if I read from these additional notes, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So specifically to St. Stephen's, excuse me, many of our elderly parishioners from St. Stephen's live in Stoke. Under the proposal, it appears the Stoke Loop is to be discontinued. However, it services an area where there is a lot of housing for the elderly. Under the Whakatū draft plan, that's the residential growth areas identified in the Nelson Tasman Future Development Strategy, all of Stoke is earmarked for considerable intensification. That's on the map that you've got attached there. Therefore, there will be a need to intensify bus services into this wider area, not reduce it. The housing intensification plan for Tahunanui is more to the west of Tahunanui Drive, which is the main residential area, with Muirtai Street, the main road for accessing the school, the kindergarten and the well-used community hub, and the bus services into town, Stoke and Richmond, without having to negotiate the very busy Tahunanui Drive with its heavy logging trucks and other port traffic. Tahuna Drive itself has a high proportion of motels, eateries and other businesses, and includes a doctor's surgery, med lab and the pharmacy, plus the tennis and bowling clubs. And I've just put a note that this needs to be taken into consideration when any suggestion to stop on-street parking under other forums, as this would mean the death knell for many small businesses that rely on passing trade. And for the elderly and young families, easy access to the doctor's surgery, pharmacy and laboratory. And I did actually speak to a number of those small business owners, and particularly from up to Toswell, I think it was, or beyond Toswell. And they had huge concerns about that, but I understand this is the forum to discuss that. So the issues that we have for our own congregation, there are serious safety concerns, the issues with heavy and other vehicles failing to stop for the pedestrian crossing outside the school in Tahunanui Drive. As you will see in my submission, we have a close connection with the school. Adding buses to the mix will make that even more unsafe for pedestrians on this crossing and create frustration for other drivers, given the stop-start nature of buses. Community programs are run throughout the week at St. Stephen's, and that attracts a lot of young families and elderly as well. Adding buses to an already busy road would be a hazard for many elderly parishioners, several of who need walkers or crutches or use walking sticks. It is highly doubtful that there is a need for a bus services between the airport, and I put here the wood, but I think actually it's the brook, isn't it? When comparing the demographics, ratepayers' money would better be spent to service a much wider area of need than transport to the airport. From my observation, a high number of people are travelling out of or arriving into Nelson for business and travel on a very early flight and returning on the last flight, either the same day or a few days later. It is doubtful that they would want a long trip on a bus. A regular bus from the airport to Nelson City might be more useful in the longer term once tourism recommences. However, the daily needs of our residents and ratepayers must take priority over tourists. So a recommendation I put forward on behalf of the church is that the status quo be maintained for the bus route through to Hunanui via Muritai, that the route not go via Pascoe Street or Nayland Road, but continue along Main Road Stoke for the reasons that I put in my submission, that attention be given to the intersection of Pascoe and Te Hunanui, so buses have priority during afternoon peak heading to Stoke from the city, that park and ride facilities linked to a peak hour express bus service be provided at Richmond and Stoke. And a mention was made to the earlier speaker about the hospital. The hospital workers have also mentioned that would be very helpful. Peak hour buses should run every 15 minutes at the height of peak hour and 30 minutes thereafter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Very, very clear and succinct, but there might be opportunity for questions. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. Just wondering if you can clarify the park and ride facilities at Stoke that you're talking about. So if because generally if someone has already gotten in their car and had to drive somewhere in Stoke, I mean, the distance to Nelson is actually quite quick. So where do you think they're sort of parking? And do you think once people get in their car and drive from somewhere else into Stoke to somewhere to park in Stoke, they'd then want to get on a bus?
The comments that have been made to me by people who live in Stoke and who work in the city is that they would take the bus if it was more accessible at the right times. But they actually live quite a way away from Main Road. So if they could drive to an area where they could park their car, because that would cover a wide area, because it's quite a wide area in Stoke. I don't know where, it's just I've heard that mentioned, but I don't know where you would put such a facility. But then that would stop people driving cars into the city. So, for example, if it's raining and they don't want to have to walk for however many minutes to get to the bus stop and then get wet. So if they could drive to park and ride facility where they were coordinated with an express bus service, I think that could be something that would be quite attractive.
If there were more frequent Stoke loops, do you think that would negate that? Because then the buses would be coming near their house.
Yes, I suppose there's a cost in that though as well, I guess, but balanced up with the park and ride. I know there's not a lot of room in Stoke. I'm sure that if buses went more into those residential areas, that could be an attractive proposition. Because the bus only runs Main Road and the residential areas is widely spread.
Thank you.
Yeah, questions? No, thanks. It's a very, very clear submission. Thanks, Caroline. I think you made your points very, very well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. Our next submitter is Mr. Ross Lamport from the First Union.
Just a quick correction, that's Lampert with an E. For the record. So thank you very much for the opportunity to address you on this. I'm here to represent bus drivers that work for MBus and therefore the city of Nelson and the region. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the current wages that are being paid to your bus drivers. It's $20.55 across the board. There's no allowance for service. There's no penal rates for overtime. And frankly, it's shameful that bus drivers that are doing this service for the city, while the city is supporting the living wage for its employees, are not getting the living wage. The living wage should extend to city contractors, should extend to bus drivers. As you've seen recently in the news yesterday, the Wellington Council has just approved a plan to go to the living wage, and we're asking that you do the same. We heard today on the radio that the they're also making a submission to the central government to support a fair pay agreement. So we would ask that you join with a joint submission to Minister Wood to ask that there be a fair pay agreement implemented across the country for all bus drivers. So that is what I was here to say. I know that you got my prior submission, my written submission. So that what I would say on top of that is there's only fair. Ultimately, paying the living wage is the fair thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and it's the minimum that these workers should make, really. If we're not paying living wages, then we're paying poverty wages. And I don't think that's where Nelson or Tasman is. I don't think that we should be supporting poverty wages. And I don't think that you guys probably want to be seen as supporting poverty wages. We love the sunshine that we get here, but it doesn't pay the rent.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, very, very clear. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Kia ora, thanks, Ross. You'll probably be able to help me out with this. Recently announced, you've got here 22.10 as the living wage. The new one was recently announced. What is that new number?
That's 22.75 from September 1st
and
of this year.
And you said, so at the moment we're paying $22.55.
$20.55.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
$20.55. So $2.20 out. By my math.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Yeah. $2.
Oh yeah. $2.20
an hour
short of the living wage as it will be in September. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Councillor Eager.
Thank you for that. So our contract runs till, I think, 2023. That's why most of our proposed changes don't start till then. So have you advocated to essentially the employer, because they could also surely choose to pay the living wage, and yes, that might impact on their profit margins, but that's also a choice they can make. And because 2023 feels like a long time before we could make a difference.
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a good question. We have really just begun that process. So we're currently organizing the workers. We're not at a point where we've initiated for bargaining, but that will come. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ross. Very, very clear, very succinct, and definitely on point. Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Richard Sullivan. Welcome, Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, we've got your submission and have read it.
Kia ora. Thanks for giving me the chance to express my support for this proposal. For me, this is the sort of thing I like to see my rates spent on. I really do think more public transport is something that Nelson could do with, and it would have lots of other benefits. First of all, it will save money in the long run, and that we don't need to spend as much on roads and other things. But more importantly, I think it would make Nelson and the region a more accessible and more inclusive place to live. And just on the inclusiveness, I'd like to support the previous submitter that paying the living wage will be part of that. And to be successful, you're going to have to attract a lot of drivers, and a way to attract drivers would be having decent pay. And it shows in other places where increasing wages to the living wage has actually improved the local economy. I mean, these people live and work and spend in their region, and they'll be the region will be better off if we pay them properly. I would also like to support what Rachel Boyack was saying. Front-loading this would make it much more likely to succeed. And I would fully recommend bringing in all the higher frequency routes as early as possible and trying to maximise the service as soon as possible to ensure that it's successful and to reap the benefits of accessibility and lowering the pressure on the roads. As someone who goes to the airport every week, twice a week, I would love a bus from the airport into town. It is something that I find severely lacking. The two worst served airports that I've been to in the last 20 years would be Melbourne and Nelson. There is, in Wellington where I work, there was an airport bus, an express bus from the airport into town. The loss of that has been a major disruption to travellers and workers in the city. But there is a nearby bus and that works. So having a bus that is walking distance from the airports that you can go to town or to Richmond or wherever is actually of great benefit to people, business travellers, workers only going for the day. Final point, the Mayor pointed out that this is costly, but I think it's worth it. I also think Nelson can prioritise spending on this. And the total budget was $5 million. We're being asked to spend $5 million on a dam. It's like, why transfer money to landowners in the Waimea when you could spend that money making Nelson more inclusive? Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Appreciate the succinctness and clarity of your submission. I'm sure we've got time for some questions if there are any. Oh, Councillor Turley.
Just a comment, really. The bus to the airport is fully supported by people in the Victory Waimea ward because of the cost of taxis or relying on neighbours. So there is a lot of support out there.
Yeah. Good. Well, that was a very clear submission, and thank you very, very much for it. And thank you for taking the time to submit and come in.
Yeah, right on time, actually. I wonder who's coming.
So, right. Yeah. So the last we're just waiting for Brett Murray.
Yeah. They never confirmed.
Well, just while we're waiting, it might be an opportunity just to have a quick look round and ask any questions or queries that members would like to sort of get for the deliberation report. Yes, I'll start looking at you, Judy.
Cool. Thank you. So I'd like some information on express bus services from Richmond, with probably, at that minimal stop, but probably as an additional service, as opposed to replacing or reducing any of the existing services. I would like information on bringing forward the frequency of buses to stage 1, the costings in particular, but any other elements around that. Maybe some data, if possible, to look at that if we need to extend the 7 to 7 period, maybe even just to 6 a.m. There should hopefully be some data through MSD perhaps, or there's key industries. Rachel Boyack mentioned supermarkets, but there's possibly some key industries we could talk to, hospital, etc., those major employers around start times, just to see whether we need to look at changing that. It's been submitted a number of times about the route changes, essentially meaning a reduction of services for Stoke residents. And so I'd like to look into that further, please, when we deliberate. Tahuna Nui route. So shifting it well, keeping it at Muritai Street, and also would like further discussion around the Nayland Road service versus the Stoke loop, the existing Stoke loop in that area. Accessible buses. So just information on how accessible our buses are, whether they're all, you know, got the lowering platforms, etc. It might be, this one might be outside of the scope, but I would like a discussion on our current timetabling, because that's currently an impediment for people catching the buses. So for example, the bus that comes via Bishopdale arrives at 8:29 or 8:59. So if you start work at 8:30, arriving at 8:29 doesn't work for you, so you would have to arrive at 7:59. So some of that current timetabling. I'd love some large maps of the current and proposed routes, including the hybrid route 2 that has been mentioned by a number of submitters. Just 2 more. Nelson North, probably just a discussion on when that might happen inside the 10, just a discussion around Nelson North. And my final one is a discussion on the airport service, and if we've had any analysis around the failures of the super shuttle service. That'll do me.
You get a second chance. Stu, you got anything?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Just need to give some consideration to that. We jointly have a look at this before we go to a decision-making process, particularly around the passenger transport. Obviously, it affects Nelson City more than us. We do have a few issues that like addressed, is the issue with the loop bus catching the end bus and in Crane Street, and the issue that was raised by someone this morning around that. And obviously just the frequency and those sort of things, and perhaps a look at the airport one as well. Not sure how viable that would be, but it's certainly been raised a number of times. But yeah, I think it's really important that we have the opportunity for a workshop or something just to see where each other are before we go to making decisions.
Yeah, thanks. Perhaps Celia?
Yeah, I thought there were some good points raised around rural residential, and it would be interesting to have some information about possible park and ride and where the hubs could be, and just, you know, and the point was made that there is no contract at the moment for that. So, you know, it's possible something could start earlier, but I think, yeah, looking really at a sort of reasonably direct bus service from some rural residential areas with where the possible hubs could be, electric bike storage, and also building this into our concept of infrastructure before we do our subdivisions, so that it becomes part of the wastewater and etc. infrastructure is the transport options, public transport options and active transport options.
I would endorse everything that Judine said. I know it was a lot, but the frequency of service is a huge issue. And on Wednesday night, I sat at Salisbury Road roundabout, and there was traffic for Africa everywhere, and an empty bus went past. I just was devastated. So it's getting people, the challenge of getting them onto the bus. The other thing is about shift workers. I know the hospital does 7 till 3, 3 till 11 and 11 till 7. So, you know, 3 shifts. And I think 6 a.m. would be great, but I think you may need to look at extending that out for shift workers to 11 p.m. and that would pick up people who've been to the movies as well. So it might be something to look at.
Yeah, not a great more. The Todd Valley thing was the thing that interests me, was a lady presenting there. Just to see, and it's not my patch, but I just perked my ears up because there must be school bus runs and stuff like that that surely could be supported or deleted or helped or whatever. Yeah, failing that, yeah, I'd love an airport bus from our way out there, but I'd also love a road off the highway into the airport a little bit sooner. But yeah, well, it's only a little stream. That's what you have diggers and bulldozers for. Anyway, yeah, so that's certainly a bonus, but then again, we're going to cut income from the airport by taking the parking away. If it's like Melbourne Airport, they make most of their money out of the car parking, more than what they do out of the aeroplane flights, and I've had that from one of the bosses over there.
Yeah, just a couple of things actually. I found these submissions very helpful, just in terms of just providing that extra edge of information that you don't normally pick up from written submissions. For me, I think there's 2 strong core routes that you would really not want to go backwards on. So they're Route 1 and Route 2. So for me, it's around frequency and reliability are probably 2 big drivers. And I would actually like to go back and just crunch those numbers again and just make sure that we're not losing anything with those 2 routes. I heard quite a bit today about going faster earlier, and there's probably is something in there, but there's always the question, of course, about how you actually achieve that and how you actually make that happen. But I think in terms of putting a credible case through the normal NZTA processes, it's about actually showing that story. So it's improving PT, but there is a bit of a fine line about making changes and then losing customers versus making changes, but people can actually see the benefit around that. One thing I did pick up on, a couple of people did talk about this, was the behaviour change and the hearts and the minds of people actually using the service. So that's something I'd hate to see lost. I think for a little bit more money and being very clear about how we focus people's attention about why and how they use the service might go a lot further than just putting in the infrastructure and the other things that we would normally associate with it. The last thing I would say is if we can look at the PT in terms of part of a transport system, so the transfer between PT services, for example, there was a number of comments about having bikes on the buses. So using multiple modes in order to complete your journey. Some of that thinking around the outside of it, of the plan, I think would also be quite useful to discuss and just make sure it's included.
Probably only 2 that, Madam Mayor, I'll let you go first.
Mr. Chair, look, most things have been picked up, but I'll just run through that bikes on the backs or fronts of buses, and actually just sorting that out in terms of that multi-modal issue is one that I've noticed. Also the really strong support for that express bus, and I just want some looking at that conversation that we had with Peter Olorenshaw around uncoupling or decoupling the country bus, and just how we're going to, whether we could operate that with a sort of a double up down the deviation. Also Jane from DHB, just that question there about putting a bus stop at 281 Queen Street, so that, because it's a long way, just to increase the stops there. The whole issue that Steve just talked about selling this, how we sell it, incentivise, and some education stuff that sits in there, because this is a marketing exercise very much, and I think we just need to really think, go and have a good look at what's world class here in terms of the messaging and making sure we've got that captured. I would like some further engagement with
with Karen from Todd Valley. So she's obviously captured quite a bit of information, but I think it's worth us sitting down with the Nelson North community and really understanding what it is that we could do to try and help that community, what sort of workarounds we could do. It's been a long-standing issue for Nelson North and particularly for Todd Valley as it's been growing. I do want to pick up that issue that we've just had around the living wage that was raised from First Union, and so I would like a conversation, some conversation with the contractor, just to see what their thinking might be. Also, I guess noting at the same end, and sometimes there might be reasons for why, I don't know, we had got a submission that was around a range of complaints about bus drivers from the Youth Council, possibly linked to that last item, but possibly not. But I just want a bit of what is the process there around a complaints process, and have we got that right? You know, what actually do we communicate around that? What's the process? The Tuhunanui route, just there were some comments from John Gilbertson around actually where that ends and the need for it to be near supermarkets and actually how it comes into the city. So again, just thinking about how we really get those routes working for the people that are using the matters. And just wanted to pick up as well in Tuhunanui, actually some conversations with the industries who are operating. If we haven't had those, we may have all of this information as we've built this, just to understand their shifts, how they operate. That issue, a large parking problem clogging up the roads around Parkers Road and Muritai Street's been raised with me on many occasions. So clearly there's a bit of an issue going on there. And I think that the only other thing here is I just was having a bit of a look at Queenstown's and what's happening with Queenstown, and I see that they've got quite a significant package of funding for next stages with Waka Kotahi. So I want to understand actually what's possible in the system and to make sure we put together our best story for funding, because I think that's going to be important. I mean, you've heard many people today saying, can we do more? I didn't hear anyone saying don't do less. I heard everyone saying please do more. So let's put up the smartest, most aspirational but deliverable package that we can, and really see if we can get some step change here. I did note the submission from the Walking Access Commission and some commentary in there around, and that was more around probably back to the regional transport plan, but just around looking at where the funding, what the different councils are putting in on funding and actually the uptake that we've got. And I just sort of caution a little bit from going, Nelson's done really well on getting that walking, cycling to work process, so we're possibly topping out on that. I'd just like to test that a little bit more, because I don't think that's the case. I actually think e-bikes are probably the transformational step on that one for both communities, and I think what you see reflected, and if we can get public transport to work well, actually what I think is we've got a community that's ready and they want some change, and actually I think we've got the buy-in. We've just got to actually make it easy for people to understand how to use the system and get those systems operating. So I'd like us to work on the approach that we've got a public that wants this. When people are asking for things, that's the right time just to deliver up the solutions that they're after. So leave it with the officers just to work for a package.
I've just got a couple of, I know that you guys, TC, need to get away really quickly, so I'll be really brief. Just a couple of ones for me. Everything that's already been said, I won't go over. Except for the airport, just a connection, bit understanding about the connection from the airport back towards Richmond and to the south and west. So I think that might be a better understanding how we might do that. A lot of people talk about bikes on bus, and that goes to the last few metres before and after the journey. So why do they need to take the bike on the bus? Is it because having an understanding of what's motivating that and how we could probably deal with that? Todd's Valley. Quickly, what would it cost if we could do it tomorrow to just extend the bus from Clifton Terrace to go that 1.9 kilometres around the bluff and to the bottom of Todd's Valley? What would that cost? And that would be really useful. I was really worried and concerned about the working conditions of the bus drivers. That's been picked up by the mayor. A fairly dismissive email I got from Tony Cumming yesterday about some of the things that were being said. Yeah, that'll do. So
They've got plenty to work on.
plenty to work on. Anyway, we'll close the meeting. And it was all stand for Carrick here and let you guys get on the way. Tua kia ronga, tua kia raro, tua kia roto, tua te waro, tua te hei tangata, hei rongo te po, ka ronga te aho, hui e, tai ki e.